already started a list of things that we don't, that we would like to see addressed in either the guidelines or even the UDO.
Not yet, but we could start one. Hey,
Michael, hey,
Welcome.
welcome.
He's back.
Aren't you just commission hopping, right?
You aren't attacking me yet,
but yeah, I mean, I haven't started anything, but I think we could do is we could, and just people could start filling it in as
Okay.
Michael, how's it going? So here are the folders.
that's.
So I'm having some issues.
Yeah.
It's ringing, it's very echoey, so I'm speaking too loudly. It's not intentional. It's actually kind of, all the noise is a little painful. I don't know. That's a good question. I've never had any allergies. I'm not congested at all.
Oh, it's bad.
Well, it's been going on for about a month. I don't think it's allergy related.
When does it calm down so I can wash my porch? Because I don't want to do that yet.
You're welcome. You have to do it like 4 or 5 times, just do it every time.
That's funny.
So, what do we need to talk about pre-meeting? We have 2 projects.
One is formal review hotel.
So they plan on this being their only review. So,
They came once before for an
We
informal.
saw that.
right, but the design, the exterior design has changed somewhat, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so are they gonna be here today, you know? Do we know?
Don't know.
You would hope so.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, so yeah.
Okay. So, I have a list of things pertaining to my subject, several subjects. So,
Why don't you lead off?
on site, we'll get it done and then toss it over to the, okay.
And it's just you this case, not you.
Yes.
Right,
And then the other one's an informal.
okay.
Of the Duke. We're not talking about Ellington either.
Just visually.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah.
Not about it, I'm trying to be.
You remember the first thing that came?
I hate it because I'm different.
But it goes back to what Kate has said before. We need to think about something. And
Well,
it starts there.
Yeah, you know, this doesn't apply, you know, these 2 projects are critical here. And then it's, a project in Asheville, project in South Asheville, where we're actually now.
Yeah.
But this is critical, and this is where we have our most damaged, delicate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does he what? I don't think so, no. They moved, well, yeah, he does. I'm friends with Tom too. Sometimes people just sell their souls to the devil. It's a joke.
But not every day, just some of the days.
It's a joke if I'm being recorded. I'm not a complete joke.
We all do it from time to time.
Oh,
I was just a little mute, but you hold it to me.
Oh. Do we need what? I was just looking.
yeah, he's been probably like a counselor. Yeah, drawing a blank, which is bad. Okay, approval of minutes, discussion. Oh, well, yes, our 2 rooftop ones, that was easy.
everyone?
I don't think Kate, he's coming in, Thomas.
Right.
Thomas is not. Kate said she may.
Yeah, for 15-minute pre-app, we're like, nah, let's just do it in the room.
Yeah. Oh, boy, that sounds fun.
So, level 2 hotel properties require that public benefits be identified and provided. So, my
And we
point
had that
is,
previously, but it wasn't.
is there a list of required public benefits or just require? Just the
Problem with that is we saw it in PRC, but we don't see it. We should see it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the question. Is that the projection under the public benefits? This is public information provided for a property. Right. Oh, this is that table, okay. Yeah, no, I agree, I know that table, okay. I'm just thinking.
What's that? Doesn't make the weird audio thing mess up, or that was just that one time? Yeah. Yeah, they're just the ones on the website, so we'll just pull those up when that item comes up. Yeah, I don't have it open currently.
Okay.
But once you get there, I'll just open it.
Yeah, we'll just open it and what about this one? The 4 or 5 pages that were sent. Is that all you need? All right.
No.
I mean, vice chair. I meant vice chair.
Michael will do it. Michael will do it.
Yeah, but if you want to use that scanner thing, we can check out that at any point.
Okay.
So if you want to show something.
It looks like it's
It might take that. One-stop shopping.
You got 4 minutes. No.
agreed.
Christina, you want to do it? Vice chair? Yeah, no. Yeah. It just means when the chair is absent, you run the meeting.
Yeah, the name without a name for this meeting.
I just want to sit next to you, that's all. I can't promise.
This is how we do it. What's that? Oh, for real? Oh. Right? Yeah, I think it's still like.
Chair.
Ready?
That's right.
Doing this thing, not the table, this thing.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, I'm Robin Rains, and I would like to welcome you to the April 20th, 2023 Design Review Committee meeting. This is a 9-person committee whose primary function is to perform design review for projects located in one of the city's 3 designated design review areas, downtown, the riverfront, and the new hotel overlay zoning district. This is a mandatory review, voluntary compliance process with one exception, and that is for hotels seeking to skip council review. Hotels taking advantage of this incentive must receive a positive recommendation from this committee. All committee members and staff are now participating in person, and we are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. I will now take roll call. Jeremy Goldstein.
Here.
Catherine Ankaya is not here. Christina Boer. Here. Stephen Lee Johnson.
Here.
Michael McDonough.
Here.
Thomas McLaughlin is not here. Brian Moffitt.
Here.
Ricardo Sejo.
Here.
And now we will proceed to the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Seconded.
Okay. And the election of chair and vice chair. I don't know how to run that.
I'd like to make a nomination.
Okay.
Sure. I'd like to nominate Jeremy for chair of the Design Review Committee.
I second that.
All in favor?
I'm sorry.
Wrong board. Should we do both of them, do the full slate?
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
I would like to nominate Christina for vice chair.
Second.
All in favor? Do we vote that way, or do we have to individually?
We can, I think, do it all together as
Okay.
a vote. I don't know if you want to take the vote separately for each. So no, the 2 motions are, you want to take
Okay.
the vote
Okay.
first for chair and then vice chair?
The first motion is the motion for chair, nominating Jeremy Goldstein. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Jeremy is the chair. Now, the nomination for vice chair is Christina Boer. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Christina is vice chair. So,
So does that mean if Jeremy takes over?
yeah, right now, he does. That's why I banged the gavel so hard today. It was the last time.
I think I'm done. The cheat sheet's done.
It's done.
Anyway. Okay, thank you. Next order of business would be new business, formal design review. And the first item, and our only item on the agenda under this category would be 68 Carter Street Mixed-Use Tribute Hotel, Level 2. The formal review of a new 8-story mixed-use building totaling 159,100 square feet. And I think Will's going to tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Chair. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design. I'll be presenting this design review item for a Level 2 mixed-use project with a hotel component. So this is being reviewed as a mandatory review and mandatory compliance process, seeking to bypass City Council by meeting the zoning code and meeting the requirements for public benefits. It would also be reviewed at the Planning and Zoning Commission for site plan compliance as well. So this project is known as Carter Street Mixed Use and Tribute Hotel Project, located at 68 Carter Street. It's currently a surface parking lot totaling about 1¼ acres. The location is between social service delivery uses with A Hope Day Center located just to the south of the site. It's zone CBD, located outside the traditional downtown core and within the tallest height zone. It is in the hotel overlay district for small and large hotels, and the site does not have frontage on any key pedestrian streets. Let's go to the site plan here. Alrighty. So essentially what's being proposed is a new 8-story tall mixed-use building with 115 hotel guest rooms, 24 residential units and commercial space. There's also 165 structured parking spaces proposed within 2 levels of underground parking. So as you can kind of see here on the site plan, the vehicular access to the project is, for the hotel use, is off of Carter Street. There's area for a valet and it's called a car auto court. And it also leads down to the other 2 levels of underground parking below that. Access to the residential parking is off of Ann Street on the west side of the site. So I'll show some of the elevations and renderings, the landscape plan. I'll note that the project was reviewed and approved with conditions at the January 9th TRC meeting, noting some areas for addressing some of the requirements in the CBD zoning district. The new submission that's before you today appears to meet all those requirements in both the CBD and the hotel overlay districts regarding things such as sighting, height, and massing, pedestrian entrances provided along frontages as required, that the ground floors meet requirements for activation with commercial uses, and also compliant fenestration is provided along all sides of the building as dictated by the zoning and allowed by building code. Just flip to the landscape plan. So here you can see the compliant landscape plan. Landscaping is relatively minimal in the CBD zoning district. Mostly includes things such as street trees and tree canopy preservation standards. You can see the street trees being proposed along Carter and Ann Streets. There are no overhead utility lines on Carter Street. Therefore, large maturing trees are required. And there are overhead utility lines on Ann Street, and therefore small maturing trees are allowed and required. There has been some recent discussion amongst staff, and this is something I haven't spoken to the applicant about, but maybe suggesting the possibility as the project moves forward about either relocating some of those utility poles on Ann Street because they have a minimal amount of utility on them, really just communication lines and then street lighting power. They're not major power lines, so if, you know, as the site currently dictates, the project is compliant, but it could be improved with that change depending on how much relocation of those poles might be required anyway. So that might just be something the applicant might want to keep in mind as the project moves ahead. We'll go ahead and flip to the floor plans. We have some updated renderings. I'll just note that yesterday that the applicant sent a revised front elevation. Essentially what's being changed from the version that was sent out last week is that this kind of upper brick massing has been capped at the floor of the top story to kind of bring that height down overall. You can see that better demonstrated here. This is the east elevation floor plan where the brick element essentially ends at the floor of the top story instead of continuing all the way up, and then this metal element kind of extends further across that portion of the facade. But you can get a sense of some materials being proposed, the 1- and 2-story total front elevation, which steps back to meet the step back requirements at the street wall height as dictated by the right-of-way as it's outside the traditional downtown core. It's mostly a brick veneer material, and then a combination of ephes paneling, metal panels, and decorative metal screening on the kind of the hotel room section of the building, as well. Let's see here. Just gonna flip to the other elevations. So you can see the west elevation off of Ann Street, the 1 and 2 story kind of portion of the building that fronts on Ann Street that has a combination of the retail use and meeting room space as well. You can see the access to the residential parking underground, this garage door. There's also a small kind of roll-up door for dumpster access that is situated more on the site and then rolled down to the parking garage entrance. It's not a separate curb cut, which was dictated by the zoning and limits on kind of like the distances between curb cuts in the CBD zoning district.
Question for you.
Yeah.
When the code says parking garages fronting on and located within 50 feet of streets shall provide a full habitable story and use along the street side facade or facades, if there's 2 different streets, with a minimum depth of 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
How does that apply to the Ann Street side?
So they have this portion of the building here that kind of screens and activates on that portion. They do not have proposed retail uses along this section where the vehicular access is. I know there's some allowances for circulation and access to the site. So kind of my interpretation is that they met the intent of that section. But that is a requirement that the design is responding to.
Can you read that again? Is there a?
Yeah, it's right here in the staff report at TRC. Per UDO, section 797, bunch of stuff. Parking garages fronting on and located within 50 feet of streets shall provide a full habitable story and use along the street side facades with a minimum depth of 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't say 50% of or 75% of. This is just a full habitable story if there's parking garages, not just.
Correct.
Yeah.
So kind of my interpretation of that and other staff who reviewed the project is that the intent of that requirement is met with the design. Obviously there has to be some allowances for access and parking garage, doors. I think that section as read literally our opinion was that it kind of is overly restrictive, and if you applied it literally, you wouldn't be able to have a parking garage door even to access the parking. So kind of based off that understanding that, they have this portion of the Ann Street ground floor that meets the intent of that, and with some, limited utility access, garage door access as needed for that design. I think it's a part of the code that could be cleaned up and be a little more clear. That's from the hotel overlay section of the code. So I think that our understanding is that the design meets the intent of that. The literal meaning might be different based on the actual verbiage of it, which I think is overly restrictive to not be able to be functionally applied when you have a building that fronts on 2 facades of a property. Or 2
I think
streets.
that's reasonable as long as you'd have the same conclusion if it was on Biltmore Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
on Pack Square. Not a different interpretation, but the same.
And it's going to depend on access to, so every site's a little bit different, and the access points, depending on if they have a side street or an alley, depend as well. So it's all very site specific, and this site is unique because it does front on 2 streets essentially. Yep. Let's see. This is the north facade. So you can see the main portion of the building here with that step back annotated along Carter Street, and then the portion along Ann Street in the background. There was some jumping around a little bit, but there was some discussion at the Downtown Commission meeting last week as they informally reviewed this project about this elevation and the other side elevations being relatively under-designed or just minimally designed or articulated. The window fenestration requirements don't apply or are superseded by building code, where buildings are built on property lines and therefore cannot put windows when they are on property lines. But there was some discussion about other design solutions that could help to mitigate some of that kind of stark appearance, which is also seen a bit on the south building elevation as well. The applicant also provided cut-throughs and renderings. So as mentioned, there is updated renderings for that east elevation. I can show those briefly. This gives a better sense of kind of the materials, the depth, the articulation of the building. You can see that revised portion of the center column brick element ending at the floor of the top story, and the metal paneling taking over that portion of the building. The access, the recessed pedestrian entrance as well, street trees. So just a more head-on view of that design. So there is some pretty significant slope on both frontages on Carter and streets as well that the building's being worked into. And then gives some reference on the Ann Street side of the adjacent A-Hope building, which is essentially a single-family house-style structure, and how that kind of relates to that along the Ann Street facade. Let's see. Some additional renderings showing the side elevations and some of the main elevations as well. So this project was reviewed informally by you all, the Design Review Committee, back on the October 20th meeting. There were some concerns and suggestions noted, such as the relatively sparse design along Ann Street and the limited pedestrian realm. I think that design has been improved in this application. That more activation and use is needed on the Ann Street building frontage, the opportunity for green building technology, as well as a well-designed and detailed public realm, and the ability for the building to respond to the changing grade along Carter and Ann Street. The project was also informally reviewed by the Downtown Commission last week at their April 14th meeting, and some of those concerns and suggestions centered around the possibility for more street-level activation in the form of ground floor commercial uses. So, the building is compliant with the zoning requirement. I think there was some discussion about, whether either that requirement is adequate or, there's always the opportunity to go above and beyond the requirement. So that was a suggestion. As mentioned, the relatively sparse architectural designs on the north and south building elements. Again, the opportunity for green building technology, the ability to address public safety through design solutions such as more street lighting, which I think is going to be an important consideration for uses in this district. There's definitely some element and contingent of transient population or folks experiencing homelessness or folks in the area for social service delivery. So I think addressing public safety through the design of the building will just lead to the success of the building and the overall neighborhood going forward. The opportunity to enhance the public realm design, I think there was some concern that the new sidewalks do meet the requirements of the 10-foot wide new sidewalk installation, but that there's an expectation that, in our parts of downtown that sidewalks and street trees are the bare minimum, so to go above and beyond that is something that the Downtown Commission welcomes. And then finally, that there's a concerned that the portion of Ann Street is under-designed or just kind of not as fully fleshed out or thought through as the main facade along Carter Street. That about sums up the guidelines, the UDO, and prior reviews for this project. Staff does support the proposed building design and recommends approval as the project is in alignment with requirements and guidelines. I'd be glad to answer any questions. You also have the applicant here with us and the architect as well to answer any questions you all may have.
Does anyone have questions for staff to start with?
If either one of these streets were key pedestrian streets, what would be different?
So the guidelines require and higher fenestration requirements. There's limits to access as well, depending on the overall site. Mostly things such as that. Some things are already covered by requirements in the hotel overlay, so things like the active uses along the ground floor are a requirement for hotels regardless of where they are. And if it was on a key pedestrian street, it wouldn't matter if it was a hotel or not. It would have to have that active uses along the ground floor. So some of those requirements apply that are similar because it's a hotel and they have similar requirements. But other things like fenestration requirements and opening calculations on ground floors are lower when it's not a key pedestrian street.
Seems like they're above the minimums, so that, would your guess be that it would meet the standards if they were both key pedestrian streets?
Yeah, I believe it's 70% measured linearly for key pedestrian streets and 50% if it's not. I believe there are calculations. I know there are calculations. I know they meet the requirements. I just can't remember the exact number. Wait. So, yeah, the Carter Street might be at 52 and the Ann Street at 51. So they're over the requirement, but it looks like below what would be required on for a key pedestrian street as that information would indicate.
Outside this project review, obviously, we are adding a bunch of people to Carter Street, not only with this project, but the one that's nearing completion.
Yes.
Seems like it ought to be a key pedestrian street. I guess we talked about making sure staff is moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And maybe this project should anticipate that to some degree.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think if we are making any changes to our to the downtown design guidelines or the CBD zoning district where the key pedestrian streets are mapped, that is definitely something that we could consider at that point. They definitely are kind of concentrated in parts of downtown, and other parts maybe aren't considered as well. And it's not that every street needs to be a key pedestrian street, but I think there are certain, you know, corridors and kind of character streets in every district of downtown that could be deserving of that kind of qualification, so they do receive that kind of extra design detail and can kind of anchor any future development there for sure.
So 50% of the street-facing facade on Ann Street is separate occupiable storefronts? And I know that there's a provision that says you can aggregate, but I think that means aggregate per street, not one street over another street.
Right, so my understanding is that it would mean that 50% of the front and 50% of the rear total have to meet that requirement. It can be aggregated, like maybe you could have.
This is two fronts, it's not a rear.
Right, right. So the Ann Street and Carter Street, my understanding is that when you aggregate those, it doesn't mean one side is 25 and one side is 25%. It could be that one side is 75, one side is 25, for instance. So that if each street is required to be 50%, one street could have a little bit more, one street could have a little bit less.
Yeah, I wouldn't read it that way.
I wouldn't either.
That's designed for a single frontage street, but if you're if you've got two fronts,
Yep.
then you can aggregate within each street, right? I mean, I had a project that had three fronts, and that was challenging. We had to meet the requirements because they didn't count the building having a rear, it was three fronts.
Well, the pedestrian isn't gonna know what's on the other side of the building, and it's
Right.
for activating it for the pedestrian, and
Right.
until they walk over to the other side, they don't know what's there.
Sure.
I thought they had that, though. I thought
It
they
looks
had-
like, yeah, that's why I was
They
just
do, yeah,
confirming. Do you have, it looks like it's 50%, but I don't know.
I think you said 52% on one of them.
Well, one was window fenestrations, the other is
There's
talking
window
about
fenestration. He's talking about the retail
activation on the ground level.
Yeah, this notes a 56% of occupiable storefront.
Awesome.
Carter Street's definitely a bit higher. So it might be a moot point of discussion for this project. My understanding is that you
And we
could
also
combine them.
Talked about at BTC how we have to kind of strike our ground floor on these projects. So I'm getting my streets mixed up, the Main Street, that's Carter, I think. There's a couple levels below that are actually, I think, parking as you go down the sidewalk, but we're counting the activation as that grade level on the main grade access. In other words, we're not forcing them to have all
Right.
three
Right.
levels as the grade drops across
Yeah.
the site.
So Jeremy, your question is about the retail space, whether it meets the
Yeah.
intent?
Yeah, and I think it's over 50%. It does. I just wanted to make sure. It's not saying, hey, let's just aggregate everything on one side of a building if it's it's got two fronts, like you had mentioned. So I think it does. It looked like it does, but I just was asking the question.
Yeah, it certainly meets the requirement in any which case. I think the question of aggregation, aggregation deserves more attention going forward. In this case, it would meet the requirements in either sense of interpreting it. I take it to mean a different meaning, so I think if they were below that, then we definitely want to be more sure about that interpretation, but it does meet it in any case of interpretation.
And it looks like they added the second occupiable floor.
Correct, yeah, that's, I think, meeting spaces now, so that they meet that. I think there was their initial design, I think, had more of the appearance of a two-story, but essentially functioning as one, whereas now it's two actual stories.
Any other questions for staff? Or?
One item we had noted, we had asked, Asheville Police Department is offering a security review, or I can't remember what they're calling it.
I think SEPTED as the industry lingo goes.
Okay. Is the applicant going to do that prior to and incorporate any suggestions specifically regarding security lighting?
So that is something that's still TBD.
Okay.
So we were just at the staff level kind of introduced by email the other day, and we're gonna have a meeting set up, I think, for Monday to talk through it. And at that point, we'd be engaging with the applicant about some of those potential design solutions. And I think we got into that aspect a little bit late in the review of this, but I think there are changes that could be made maybe as the project moves to final TRC that don't really affect the design of the building itself.
Agreed.
But yes, so we'll be pursuing that, and I think that's definitely something that we're going to be taking advantage of going forward to ensure that public safety design and buildings and sites that are naturally provide public safety is something that we see more of. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address the third access point that says it exceeds the number of curb cuts?
So that's not a curb cut down here, referring to this roll-up door.
The little service thing.
That was in the previous design a curb cut, and that was over the limits of spacing. It's basically they have kind of a separated portion of the sidewalk, so they have their 10-foot wide sidewalk, and then another portion that's distinct from that public sidewalk where they'd roll the dumpster out of and then down, presumably to the actual curb cut where the entrance is. So that was their solution for the limits on driveway spacing, curb cut spacing.
We're ready for that.
Do you have questions for the applicant as well? Is he?
I know several of us do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Will.
You're welcome.
If the applicant is, I think there are some questions for the applicant. Whomever wants to step up to the podium.
We thought we'd do site first, if that,
Could we close that door? Would that be
Yeah.
okay?
I'll do that in a moment, yeah.
gonna drive?
I can help you drive, show you how to drive. This is the site plans, that might be helpful.
I'll just leave it there.
Okay, and there's other tabs with the floor plans, the revised front elevation and the renderings too.
Okay, I don't think I'll need to go back to this. My name is Tony Hauser. I'm with WSP here in Asheville. I'm a civil engineer on the project.
Matt Gower, ODA Architecture.
Welcome, Tony and Matt.
I'm sorry?
I said welcome, Tony and Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you for the
Happy to be
opportunity.
here.
Do you have anything y'all want to mention before we kind of just get into some questions, or?
I guess just a kind of a quick walkthrough, or to address some of the comments that you guys have discussed on the Ann Street side. What we've tried to do there is, obviously we've got the 2 stories now. I think that your question about the aggregation was our original proposal with the informal. We were putting most of that on Carter, so we do in fact meet that or exceed that 50% on both sides. And we've got retail down at the sidewalk level. We've got meeting space at the level above, and then that meeting space actually opens up, and there's a portion of a kind of amenity terrace that's part of the pool terrace, and a event terrace for the meeting space that has balconies that also look over onto Ann Street. We felt like that really kind of would help to bring some life and energy to Ann Street, as events and things that were happening up there. So we can walk through the plans if you have specific questions about that. But,
Thank you for doing that.
yeah.
Okay, Chair, if it's okay, we'll just start with some
Please do.
site comments. So, Mr. Hauser, it's good to see you. You're also a landscape architect, and you probably know this site better than anybody in the room, just because you've lived and worked around it for a long time. So glad you're on the project. The comments that are going to be made are comments that we typically bring up with any hotel project that comes before us in this new updated format. By not having to go through city council with the hotel development process, this group has been charged with a lot in terms of community benefits and how projects like this not only benefit the developer with a successful in-budget project, but projects that are good for the community. So we appreciate you coming back. We appreciate you coming to town, architect. Regarding the site, are there any elements in the site design, and I'm specifically talking about the streetscape, are there any elements that go above and beyond the minimum requirements of the UDO?
Other than the sidewalks being wider than the minimum 10 feet?
So in some areas it does go wide, it is wider than 10 feet?
That's correct.
Okay. What is the proposed on-street parking like right here? Is there on-street parking?
There's no on-street parking on either of these streets.
Okay.
They're simply too narrow to accommodate it.
Okay, thanks. So that obviously opens up an opportunity for some interesting streetscape opportunities rather than consistent tree grades all the way down. If we don't have cars parking at the curb and pedestrians walking out, there's some unique and interesting opportunities. With stormwater management, how is the stormwater being handled on this project in terms of meeting the minimum state requirements?
Because of the footprint size of the buildings, it will be handled within the building footprint.
Okay.
So it's not handled under the sidewalks or anything like that.
Okay, so it's like an underground storm tech system?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't know the details of it. We're not designing it. I did have a conversation based on our informal meeting with y'all previously with Public Works about the possibility of locating stormwater measures below the walk, and they were not interested in owning that or maintaining that.
Yeah, I can completely understand
That
that.
utility. So.
We appreciate y'all looking at some alternatives. with, again, as I mentioned, hotel projects like this that are extremely sensitive for the citizens of Asheville, we do look for special community benefits, and personally, above and beyond minimum requirements. I regret that what I am seeing in the site is not getting the same level of attention in terms of design as the design of the building, in that it's basically meeting minimum requirements. And so the pedestrian experience is one thing. Has the owner been made aware, or have y'all discussed with them alternative stormwater management techniques such as green roofs?
To some level, but,
Okay.
you know, we've got on the amenity terrace where the pool is and some other hotel amenities, we're certainly planning some planting areas there that would, you know, I think
Okay.
aid with that, but it's not designed specifically for that
Okay.
purpose.
And that space does look, it's going to be really nice. I know that, and definitely, before I go further on this, every project is not suitable for a green roof. Many projects are not. To me, this project is perfect for a green roof system. Part of that is because of the location of the proposed hotel and mixed-use facility. It is in an area of downtown that has been identified as the highest level of heat vulnerability, highest rating in the core of downtown. And without doing anything, these projects continue to contribute to the heat island impact. I understand the positive aspects of storm tech systems, and we're going to need to know what the stormwater management system is on this. But I know there are many positives to this, and I'm a landscape architect, and many of the projects that I work on with civil engineers, the best way of managing stormwater is through storm tech. I also know that it's the easiest to install, but it can also be the most expensive to maintain. Even more so, storm tech systems are single infrastructure or single purpose infrastructure. They do one thing, and that is they convey stormwater and they meet the requirements. That's it. Personally, committee members, I think that we need systems that do more than just provide one benefit systems in our community. And it's not that it's that difficult. And it's not that the owner has to shoulder the costs of green roofs. There are many benefits to the owner. We all know several of them. Longer life expectancy to the roofing membrane, lower cooling costs, potential overall less expensive to install, actually, than some storm tech systems. The biggest benefits that I see are that green roofs can actually capture up to 80% of the stormwater before it hits, in this case, a very aging infrastructure system we have here. And I know every city, medium to large size city in the southeast has this issue, but our system is in a critical state in some areas. And downhill from this site, there's a multi-million-dollar infrastructure project to try to help correct some of those. But up to 80% less stormwater would be going into the system if a green roof system were used here. And just to get a sense of that for everybody else here, and for anybody that's watching recording of this, in a common basic storm or basic rainfall event, a green roof can capture up to 100% of the water. In a 10-year storm, it can catch up to 80%. Now, at a hotel project, the big benefits are that it brings biodiversity within the city, such as native pollinator species. We have several great examples downtown of green roofs. And the activity that takes place on these roofs is astounding. If you get up there and look at these and study them, the pollinators that are up there and the beauty that occurs. It also lowers the surface temperature downtown, helping us to fight the urban heat island impact. So I think that if this has not been explored with the owner, it should be. And again, I feel like there are many aspects of this project that point to a perfect case scenario for a green roof system. And if, in addition to that, I think that meeting minimum requirements in streetscapes is not what we want to see with hotel projects moving forward that are within our purview. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What type of streetscape items would be appropriate in this application, in your opinion?
Well, I think it would be a level of design. It would be an element that would be designed, such as something that is actually engaging pedestrians as they walk by. And that could be a combination of an integrated planter system that's a part of the building at the base, rather than have a sidewalk and then the building coming straight down and there's a dead zone there. It could also be with the use of color. We're in one of the most creative cities in America, and this streetscape could be in, Akron, Ohio. And the use of color, the use of street furnishings, things that engage pedestrians. In this case, for marketing of the hotel, it's easy on the Carroll Street side because, you've got guests coming and waiting and people coming into the new restaurants, and there's just no sign of any type of creative exploration of how to activate these streetscapes.
I would also add that we would want to see something more than just the minimum tree grading design, but something like a silvicell or other suspended paving kind of system to increase the good soil volume, and that's also a stormwater mitigation measure.
The city does have in place these new minimum requirements for soil area, which this project is meeting. But obviously, the silvicell system kind of takes that to the next level.
Right.
So, but this project, the tree grades are showing the required minimum, which is a lot more than we used to see. But one thought in the streetscape in this case is, what not to do, especially because there's not on-street parking, is there could be a green band along the back of curb and take the tree grades out, perhaps even save money, and do a green band of low ground cover plantings. We're not going to have pedestrians walk over it, and imagine how that would enliven that space. These streets need all the help they can get. They got a long way to go. So that's another example of how to, enliven the streetscape.
Has the applicant looked into any of these types of?
I think, I'm a landscape architect, as he said, I'm a civil engineer. I think these are great ideas, but they're not what are in UDO right now, and they are not what Public Works is looking for right now. Public Works doesn't have the staff to maintain what's required by UDO now, and that was the answer I got from Public Works. So I think this is a great conversation to have with Public Works. And having sat on P&Z for 6 years, I can tell you that those kinds of changes to the UDO need to happen.
Well, we're not saying
can I
that
finish?
Okay, go ahead.
But it's really not fair to somebody, a resident developer, or even a non-resident developer in the city of Asheville, to apply arbitrary requirements on them in the middle of their project. And you know this as well as I do, because as do you. You do this type of work also. There has to be some sort of, and that was the reason we had a hotel moratorium for the period that we did, was to provide that defined, objective program that a hospitality developer would have to meet in order to get their project accepted without having to go through council or with having to go through council. So these are valid, I agree.
And I completely understand what you're saying, Tony. There are minimum requirements that are set forth in Unified Development Ordinance that hotels, apartments, commercial buildings have to meet. In this case, as we vote, there's always the option for a developer, especially for a hotel, to go beyond the minimum. And if they choose not to, my thought is they can just go to city council. It's as easy as that. But this has all been, the amount of pressure that has been put on us to try and get the best products in a fair way out of developers is huge. it's huge. We get comments every time a hotel comes through here. And what we're talking about are not items that potentially would have a significant impact on cost and budget. We're talking about design, and we're talking about exploration, and not just going strictly by what's in the UDO. I'm in the same business. I totally understand. I also understand client expectations and budgets play a huge role in this. I mean, this is a huge investment, and it's...
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. My concern is that you're asking for something that the city doesn't want.
Well, it's not that the city doesn't want. You're talking about Public Works, that it's not their job to give feedback on streetscape design. They're not landscape architects. They're looking at the minimum requirements, and they're checking off the list. And if the developer's like, okay, I met the minimum 2-inch caliper tree, I met the minimum, requirements across the board, imagine what this town would look like. It's going to continue to look like some of the buildings that have come up now. Now, if it's an apartment building that comes in front of us, it's mandatory review, voluntary compliance. We give comments. A lot of times those apartment developers will go back to the drawing board and meet us halfway. On hotels, it's mandatory review, mandatory compliance, within reason. And I think that the site elements, I'm not talking anything about architecture, the site elements that I have brought up are all very reasonable. The citizens of Asheville, the community realm, deserve more than bare minimum. And I don't care what TRC and Public Works is saying. I really don't.
Let me chime in there. So what does he do if we request, the band, I think, like a planting strip or something like that between the curb and the sidewalk, and then Public Works says no?
Well, I think
it's not approved until you fix that. Who does he obey, us or them?
Well, I think that just like every other city, and especially in front of a hotel, I'll give an example.
You understand my question?
I understand exactly what you're saying.
We're putting him between
I don't think we can require them to do anything that won't be approved by the city.
That's
Well,
what I think.
Is the
That's what
property
I'm
line
trying to
on the
say.
curb?
No,
It's back.
No, it's back. Let me address,
So the
So
strip-
let me address, so
the
the
city
planting
right away.
strip is in the city right away.
Right.
The city's saying, I'm asking. Steve.
Right. And I think that in large part of this might be communication with city staff, but if you consider the long-term maintenance of street grades and trees, and then a lot of this falls on the responsibility of the property owner. I see every single day 2 people with brooms and blowers clearing every square inch of every bit of sidewalk around an entire block area as a business, because,
Sure.
and that's the Eris Hotel downtown.
Which we could talk to the developer about.
Right.
But if, he goes to final TRC and they go, you gotta, as a condition,
Exactly.
you gotta take this out.
Well, it might not be if it was actually proposed.
I think the point that I'm taking from this, regardless of this specific suggestion, if we require anything that they won't require, they trump. They would be approved,
That's my
subject to
understanding.
approval by TRC, but we can't make the city, TRC, bend to our will.
Correct.
Okay.
I think that answers the question.
That's what I'm.
In that regard, like if it's.
What I was trying to get to.
but it's problematic for the developer, this project or any project, as you well know, to have to go back and redesign and bill them that expense to redesign, only to get to TRC and find out it was never going to be allowed in the first place.
Well, all right.
That's a problem.
Well-
But let me address the specific example that you mentioned and you brought up a few moments ago, having this green band along the street. And you made the comment that people aren't parallel parking there, so there's no traffic there. You're familiar with Ann Street, I think, as well as I am.
Yeah.
The population currently on Ann Street doesn't use sidewalks, doesn't use trails, and I'm not denigrating this
Right.
population. I've lived with them for 6 years.
Yeah.
I know how things operate, and I know we have board members from Homeward Bound in the audience with us right now. There are goat trails all over Asheville. There's no prediction of where people walk. So there have to be opportunities for people to get from the street, even where there's not a crosswalk, into the development. So
And I'm just using that as an example, Tony.
I
Definitely
understand.
not- there are other opportunity, it could be, a 4-foot-long band of cobble pavers.
well, as you may notice in the site plan, we're not showing the typical running bond pattern that the city requires, and I've been told that we may need to use the typical running bond pattern.
What it looks like, is it a larger pattern?
It's a larger pattern. It's a 4x6 pattern that goes well with the 4-foot wide tree grades.
Mm-hmm, yep.
So,
Well, Tony, I just wanted to bring up my concerns. This is definitely not personal, but.
I understand.
It's the stormwater and the site design, but stormwater especially.
So,
One last, Stephen Lee, is there anything regarding pedestrian experience, places to sit, things like that, that you would want them to investigate that would be allowed?
Well, I mean, I know it's a challenge because the street has a slope, but, there may be points at the hotel entry, points at the residence entry. There's just no evidence that anything has been looked at.
So, speaking of someone who's been on this street for 20 years every day, my guess is there's a hesitation to provide that type of amenity because the people who are coming to Homeward Bound will take over.
Right.
And it's happening now. They expanded the sidewalk to 10 feet, and it becomes a
Right.
place where go there every day. People are camping and sleeping
Well,
and
and
all of their possessions. So that is really not our purview because we should follow the law. Law says there's no parking on the street, yet no one enforces the fact that people park there all the time, on that street, on the curb.
Well, and I don't think that supersedes the developer's need to
And I
make
would-
this a.
And I would agree with you.
And every, at one point, every business well into Pack Square deals with this issue. It's gotten a lot better. I walk it every single day, and it's gotten a lot better. But there are challenges at this site. But,
Let me ask you about the green roof.
yeah.
I have to look at your roof plan, but you're not suggesting that they make the entire roof a green roof, but maybe a section or a portion of
I'm-
could be integrated to
I'm just
provide
suggesting.
benefits or save money and that you suggested.
Right, and something that meets the goals of the developer. I mean, I didn't even mention the huge marketing potential of this. I mean, there were people that would stay in a hotel if they knew that there was a green roof on it and there was active pollination and bees and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying, it shows there's been an analysis that it's not even a more practical, less expensive system. Show us that there's at least a portion of this, but it's just like all membrane and that's it, done, checked off the list, it's minimum requirement, next. And I don't think that, like I said, I need to see elements that go beyond, and this is easy, go beyond the UDO. How hard is that? How hard is it? I mean,
it's not as easy as you would think, and you probably know from dealing with
Right.
it. Just the paving pattern.
let's just focus on stormwater. Let's focus on tree size.
So I had the conversation after the informal meeting, I had the conversation with Public Works about potentially using I forget the name of the system, proprietary system that's allowed below tree grades.
Yeah.
And there was,
Silverset, yeah.
I think it was still a silver
Yeah.
product. But anyway, I think there was, I'll have to look back at my notes, I believe I got pushback on that. And again, I don't know exactly how we're handling.
Yeah,
There's a slight increase here
yeah.
in impervious compared to what was there. As you may know, this was the Citizen Times parking lot for
Yeah.
decades. And it was just a big black asphalt pad, which contributes to the heat island effect that you were talking about. But the point that I'm trying to make, just with this as well as other items, is there needs to be that coordination with the city departments.
Mm-hmm.
And they, maybe you're right, they shouldn't be the ones who dictate it. Maybe they should be accommodating of these ideas. But the arbitrary application of them in the middle of a development project without knowing at the end that they will be accepted is problematic.
Well, I think maybe if some of it was presented to them. But having said that, was any of this presented to them?
I discussed with them specifically about amenities along that area additional stormwater measures other than just standard detail, I forget the number, for these tree grades and the soil that's required, the required soil volume. We're making a change from the standard detail that instead of a washed stone below the walk, we're using a expanded polystyrene, basically a subgrade that the walk sits on. I had that discussion with, I forget, Nancy or somebody in stormwater to make that change. But anyway, so I've had these discussions, and if they're quantifiable, and I know when we get to TRC they're going to be approved, that's great. But if I go to that extra effort as a result of a TRC meeting or a DRC or P&Z, if I go back and I make those changes and I spend that time, my client's money, to make those changes, and I get to that final TRC and I'm kicked back because of those very things that we were asked to include, that's really problematic.
Well, I can tell you that every hotel we've reviewed in the last year, these items have been brought up. And I can also tell you that every citizen in this town would benefit from improved stormwater measures, especially something similar to a green roof, if it were feasible. And I feel like this is a project perfect for that. And I think we probably need to move to architecture, given time.
Are there any other site comments?
Yeah, the trench idea is interesting, but short of that, it sounds like you've plugged in the right amount of trees to meet UDO, street trees. And I think that what he's saying is, why stop at the minimum number of trees? And even if we can't get a longer trench, Public Works isn't gonna have a problem with 4 more trees per street.
Absolutely, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
larger trees.
And also, instead of the trench, it could be pervious paving, switching to pervious paving. I guess the water's gonna sheet away on the sidewalk towards the curb, so that would at least drain, percolate the stormwater on the sidewalk at least. So just little stuff like that, and I agree with Steve, and it could save money, just, who knows?
I think that, I think increasing the number of trees would be something that my client would probably consider. I would have to look at the spacing and see that we're not getting too close. So we'll certainly discuss that.
Yeah, it looks pretty full now to meet the minimum standard, so.
And that's always a challenge. We're already locating trees in the site triangle, which is allowed if they're required street trees, but they're not happy about it. Transportation and Public Works don't like street trees in site triangles. People who drive cars don't like street trees in site triangles, and you understand why. But they're allowed as an exception for street trees in that situation. But we'll certainly go back and look at that. Permeable pavement is a great tool in the right geology. Asheville's not a great geology for that. You essentially have to create a space below that permeable pavement to receive that water because most of the soils in this area don't percolate well. So it becomes a more expensive product or more expensive implementation than, let's say, Morehead City or somewhere like that. It's something that we always consider, and it tends to be site-specific whether or not it's applicable. I hear what you're saying, though, and I appreciate it. And those kinds of ideas are very helpful because those, like you said, those are ones that we know we can look at, and when we get to final TRC, Public Works, or whoever, transportation, isn't going to come back and say, we don't want it. And then we have to go back and redesign. And you know as well, too, you're an architect also. So.
My last comment, I'm going to be quiet, but again, I started off by saying I wish that the site design could follow the same level of effort as architecture. The architecture and the building and the structure meet minimum building codes and they meet TRC, but there's also design and architecture that goes well beyond those requirements. TRC does not address minimum standards with that other than fenestration and setback. So, but anyway, those are my comments.
Do we have any other further site-specific comments, or want to move on to the architecture? Any comments on the architecture?
Architecture. I'm up. Okay, I got 3 main things. Site lighting is really not in our purview, but one of the things I'd like to kind of know a little bit more about how the building's being lit. But I want to talk about the north and south elevations. I want to talk about the Ann Street design, and then I want to talk a little bit about your recent revision on the cap. So first, the north and the south elevations. Obviously, we understand, property lines and stuff like that. We understand that you can't always do the fenestration there, but I especially, and it's a little bit difficult to see on those north and south elevations, but the north really, there's just no articulation on that facade. It is just pretty well blank. I think when I was looking at the architectural, there was more on the south than was showing up in the rendering. In the rendering, it looked like a gray block, but it looked like there was a little bit more articulation on the south. So please don't say mural, but is there something we can do on that architecturally to articulate, you know, planes and detail? Because let me back up first, because we had a good conversation back in October. I think the building's come a long way. I really like the building organization. I really like the level of detail that has happened on the project. I like it. I'm super pleased with, you know, what you're bringing. I'm happy to see this come to Asheville. And then I look at this and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had some more of what I have on Carter Street. I know I can't have all of that right here, and I know it's, you know, there might be a building built up against it in the near future, or there might not. I would just like to see that articulated. So can you speak to those two elevations, and if there's anything you can do architecturally? I know they can't be up to the same level, but can you address that a little bit?
I think murals are always, I'm just kidding. No, I think absolutely we can, you know, what we've really tried to do on the street frontages is to incorporate some nice depth in the facade with some brick detailing, and even where the building transitions to EFS, we've taken some of that same detailing and applied it to the EFS. So I think we can certainly start to do that on the portions that touch the property line, even though we can't have fenestration there. I think this elevation in particular is a bit deceptive because the site, you know, is kind of pushed and pulled, and so a lot of that you're seeing is well beyond, and there's there's other activity happening there, but
the gray box right in front of
but
me.
yeah, certainly that 8-story portion that is right on the property line.
And like you've done a detail where you've put the screen over an opaque piece in a couple places, and that's a very special piece, so I don't want you to do the same thing there.
Sure.
But something like that, narrower pieces where you're applying that screening and applying that articulation on this elevation, I think would go a long way. We've got other folks here that'll chime in on that. So that's my north and south elevation bit.
Okay.
I'm getting my streets mixed. The Ann Street piece is more developed than it was before. Can you go to that piece, like one of the renderings? Actually, let me go to, so there's one that says North Ann Street view.
Yeah,
It's-
A210, actually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 205 is
Chromebooks.
Carter Street. They say. That says and, well, yeah, there it is, that's and 2. But 210.
That one right there,
is
that one
got-
right there. North Ann Street view. So I like the detail and stuff of this, but I kind of want it, there's two things, especially in the North Ann Street view. It feels like it's a gray box that has a little applique to it in the way that's being rendered right now. I want this to be related to the building, but to be more of its own thing. It right now is just, it could be a really special piece, and it's not yet. It's a little bit more of an afterthought to the rest of the building, and there's a lot going on in the big building beyond it, so that this feels, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I keep looking at this like, man, that could be a sweet little jewel box, and it's kind of not right now. And so part of what I'm reacting to is that you've done such a great job on the other side, and I'm not quite seeing the same level. And I know it can't be because you got to have a rear entrance, and I understand all that. But it's kind of its own thing. There will be a retail space there, and then there's the space for the residences above. And so I kind of want to see the same level of thought that you gave to the Carter Street side to this side.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's two philosophies there. One is you know, let this facade be something completely different. The other, try and tie it into the rest of the architecture, and we've taken that approach, you know.
Which I don't disagree with, but I want it to be I want it to be tied in and still be special.
Sure, yeah, I mean, so we've taken the brick detailing from Carter and applied it here. I do get your point of sort of the thin veneer from this angle. On the other side, where on the image on the right, the brick does return, the full depth and kind of creates that almost pavilion space that is the outdoor space to that meeting space on the second floor, which is part of the hotel. It's not, I suppose it's for use for residents in the condos as well as hotel guests. But no, I mean, I certainly see your point, and I think some of this is driven by hotel brands and their desires to really make sure that the presence of the hotel is apparent. The brand is apparent on all facades and all entries into the hotel, but certainly your point is taken, and maybe there's some different material or color or something we can use to
Maybe it's something in the
blend
screen. One of the things I'm reacting to is that the hotel looks like a hotel, but this is retail.
Mhm.
So I would like the retail piece, there should be something going on that clues me in that this is for public use in a way that the other side is not. I can't get more specific than that.
That's
Yeah,
a good point.
The fenestration is exactly the same as on the other side. The screens are the same, but I don't know if I'm articulating it very well, but this is okay, but it could be great, and you're clearly capable of great. So let's see it.
Yeah.
Last thing is that when you revise the cap, we lost something. I don't know how to bring that up. So in this model, the break in the big cap right there, you can see it right there, was it made really good sense to me. Like, you were taking that vertical element up and expressing that well, and the break in the cap made sense. In the revised renderings, it got real muddy.
Go to one of the other tabs.
Like where the
rendering,
break
1, 2,
is and what's
install.
going on up there. And I understand that you're doing something, there's something about the heights, but it's not working yet. And I don't know how to just express it other than that. It's just where you broke the big cap. I know it's over the entrance, but it's just not expressed as cleanly as the previous design.
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly that's a point that we've kind of been back and forth on. There's some
Go back.
desire to sort of set that, I'm sorry, go back, is that what you said?
Go back. It was better.
There's, I think, some concern that just the visual height of that was on such a narrow street was
This is
maybe too much, and we were trying to accentuate that horizontality and sort of set off that top floor, which is going to be a bar restaurant.
Yeah, I get that. Like, the break doesn't make any sense to me now. Like, the
Mhm.
break made sense before with that
No,
nice
I
little narrow
understand that,
piece.
yeah.
And it caught attention. It brought me down and then over to the front. Now I'm
Sure.
just like, what? Okay, what? And so, like, either don't do a break or make the break. I guess what I'm saying right now is, like, the break got weaker, and I'm like, well, just don't break it at all, or if you're gonna break it, break it.
Well,
Yeah, no.
couldn't you break it at the place where the signage band goes vertically and not raise the roof? I mean, if it was a height issue.
Or make
Yeah,
it a
just basically
negative.
shift
Yeah.
that break to the right,
Yeah.
where it was before,
Yeah,
but
'cause that
not
signage
necessarily take the brick up.
Band.
Yeah, I think, that was
It's cleaner.
sort of debating on that, and I broke it where the hotel entry was,
Yeah.
but no, I think standing back and getting
Got it.
additional feedback on it, no, I think you're right. I mean, I think could be a blending of the two. I mean, there's certainly a desire to sort of accentuate that horizontal aspect of
I'm
the
gonna
facade in
let everybody else
general,
talk.
but,
If you bring up the head-on rendering, I think there's a couple of
Your-
things that,
original design or?
no, on the revised.
Yeah, rendering 2.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. So, in the original, it was a very clear vertical element, like Brian is saying, it was breaking the roof line, right? But here, the roof line is broken, but not with the vertical element.
Right.
Right? So if you take, even if you pull the roof back, that's already gonna start to bring that element a little bit back,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And I would also suggest the color of, that metal panel. Is that metal panel in the back at the top?
The sort of eyebrow piece or the wall?
The wall itself. So
No, it's probably not metal panel. But
if that goes to a lighter color, that starts to then blend back with that vertical expression, right? And I was going to suggest one thing on the, I think the color, particularly on the Ann Street side, I think color is definitely something that's going to help you. I think there's
That's a good point.
yeah, I think there's that Ann Street side just sort of all blends together, and you just have this sort of mass. And I think just changing colors, just looking at different colors and on that side, I think it's gonna go a long way.
He could do the same style and detail and just different colors and it would pop.
Exactly. And then,
Should hire you.
and then the screening, I think it's beautiful. I would suggest where you use that screen at the street level, change the pattern to something a little tighter. So it's responding to the, we're bringing it down and we're bringing it to pedestrian scale. So where people can touch it or can almost jump up and touch it, it'll be same pattern but something a little tighter, which, when you're standing there, in reality, because of the forced perspective, it's gonna look the same.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it actually does change in a few different locations. I think it's not evident in the sort of distant rendering, and we'll continue to develop that. And, trying to tie it in, the pattern itself tying into some elements of the interior, so it really is telling a story about the whole experience in the project. So, I think that's a valid point, and certainly intended as we continue to move forward.
Any other?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the south facade. It seems like that above the third story, it sets back from the property line, allowing you to put some more openings. Where are you relative to what the building code allows you in terms of openings? And that, to the right there, that drawing's deceptive. There's a podium. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's a setback.
Right, so there's the tower, and then it steps back, and that's the parking, and then on top of that is an extension of the hotel lobby and that amenity space and the meeting space over on the far left.
So the setback, the step back, there's kind of a roof terrace.
Right.
Is happening right where that little shoulder is on the right.
Yeah, I think we've got some massing.
It seems, so I guess,
I think it's down there the other way. Go to the end of the document. Yeah, there you go.
So
Yeah, because this is not visible.
this is the.
in that room, right?
I don't know that your massing
I'm not
shows
sure
it
we
from
have
that south. It's
that
for sure.
perspective on here,
yeah,
but
it
but-
doesn't, but it's hard to read that.
From now on,
that
just bring your Revit models
That there's a tower
Happily.
sitting on a podium.
and let us have them
Yeah.
so we can spin around.
So my question
Yeah,
is,
where are you going with that?
so, because the tower is set back from the property line and the podium it sits on, 12 to 20 feet or so, are you at your limit for openings on that south end wall in the tower?
No, I mean, some of that's driven by the hotel guest room layouts. So again, I think this elevation, though, it's not the best. So, the top two floors there before the restaurant level are apartments or condos, and so that has a different layout, and we've been able to get windows there. The way the guest rooms for the hotel are currently configured, typically we wouldn't even have in windows like that, but we've added some in to work with the requirements that the brand puts on us for hotel room layouts. And then below that, I think we've got some on the front, and then we've got kitchen space, so there's, didn't necessarily want to have windows looking into utilitarian space like that, and then below that's garage. I think we could certainly add some openings. We've got, transformers down there at the ground level that we can't have windows, for other code reasons, obviously, but I think we could potentially add some opening on the tower piece, along with a little more modulation of just the facade itself, just to give some shadow and depth to it.
It almost looks like there used to be a building there, and you were.
They got torn down.
And it got torn down, and I
Sure.
know there's a hallway there, so you could put a window at the end of the hallway, which would be a great thing to bring some light into the hallway. And I know that might get kind of weird to have a vertical stripe down the middle, but I think the top of it looks great, and if you could just bring the fenestration down a few more floor levels, and, you know, it'll, great view, why not? And eventually, hopefully, something will come up below it to the south. So, yeah, that would be my comment.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely, we can.
Well, it's nice to hear that you have not reached the building code limit in terms of openings on that facade, so you do have the latitude.
Yeah, I think in that portion, I mean, obviously where the parking is, we are right on the property line, so there's really nothing we can do there, but it's so far back into the site, I think less of a concern, but yeah, where we've pulled the tower away, it is far enough away that we could probably increase that a little bit. You know, again, we don't want views into kitchens necessarily, but I think it's also removed enough from the street that maybe just a couple of windows there just to soften that facade would be
Even up
helpful,
high,
so. Yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
so you
sure.
can't actually see.
Yeah, I mean, they need daylight in kitchens too, so not a concern.
Any other architectural comments from anybody?
I agree with most of what was said. I'm so glad that you added the retail on Ann Street side. And I think just circling back to some of the comments about the conditions on that street now, I think the biggest improvement to that is finding a way to activate it. So I think it's really important that that the comments that were made about you know, celebrating that piece of the project are looked into.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm sure we'll call you back up if there's more questions.
Okay.
And just for some discussion amongst ourselves. So the piece I'm struggling with, Stephen Lee, is, well, do we need public comment, by the way?
Prior to a motion.
So there's no motion, but let's see if there's any public comment before we discuss.
Did we want to look at the public benefits table? Or did we want to ask about that? That was something.
Well, I mean-
we talked about before. Does that matter?
I don't know if it matters in the sense of what they choose. They have the choice to choose, as
Right,
long as they
right.
meet it.
It only applies if they're doing something that affects the design, like if they're trying to incorporate art, or if they're doing sustainable design or something like that. I think that's the only time it really comes.
Does anybody from the applicant know what you're choosing on the public benefits table that you could share with us to meet the requirements?
I thought you covered that at DTC.
It's in a record somewhere, I don't know if it's changed.
Yeah,
It
that's
has
right.
not changed. It's a contribution to the affordable housing,
Okay.
and there was a small portion, 10 points, I forget what it was for a second component. But the majority of it is public housing, or affordable housing, excuse me.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'd like to open it up for public comment, and then we can have further discussion. Opening up for public comment at 1:48. Please, come on up. Do we have the same guidelines of 3 minutes and all that stuff?
Yeah,
that we
we're
have
not.
for other
We should
boards?
stick to that. Yeah, we're not, you know.
Okay, you have 3 minutes unless you want to congregate 3 people and you can speak, and they
Okay.
cede their time and you have 10 minutes.
To be sure, can I ask a question specific to the design, or is it just a comment?
No,
Okay.
you've got 3 minutes.
So on the south side, there is a retaining wall
Oh,
currently?
yeah, could you state your name and
I'm
identify
sorry.
who you are for the
My
record?
name is Mayumi Steins. I'm representative from Homeward Bound. I'm a board member. I'm also a contractor. So on the south side, there's a retaining wall currently holding the parking structure, well, parking. What is the plan for that side? Is it going to be retaining wall, or is that going to be parking foundation? How close is it going to be on the property line with the Homeward Bound property?
Is that the only question?
That's the only question I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to answer that?
Sure. So I believe for the retaining wall is on the south side. I mean, it gets removed and excavated for the levels of parking below. And so that wall that is the edge of the parking you see on the right image there would be kind of taking the place of that.
And it's
So
on the property line, goes to the property
It
line?
is, yeah, I mean, it's within inches of the property line, but it, as a solid wall, obviously, it would screen the parking, and even at the upper level of parking is high enough to screen that level of parking as well, so.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Wright. I'm the board president at Homeward Bound. Obviously, we are concerned about the safety and security of our clients and assume that everybody in the room is concerned about the safety and security of the hotel residents and the guests and the tenants there. So we're just curious about what's being done to address those issues within the context of the design or anything else in conjunction with the project.
Okay. Before we try to get that answered, I'm just going to continue with public comment, and then we'll come back to that. Is there any other public comment? Please.
David Bailey, interim executive at Homeward Bound. Just a couple comments. One, we were at a community meeting last week with the property that's going to be developed on the south side. I hope will be bordered by two large developments. And I like what you said, Mr. Johnson, in terms of your side of now reflecting what's best for Asheville. And I'm wondering how, we've not had a conversation with the owners about how this sort of serves the best interests of the clients that we're serving for the greater community. Plus, so I'm curious about how that gets integrated into the plan, yes or no. And aligned with that was the talk about this being a key pedestrian street. It sounds like it's not, and yet we've got a hotel to the south, hotel to the north, hotel to the northeast, and a hotel across the street. And it seems like there ought to be some cumulative effect about that. And the same thing, I asked this question last week, around traffic. We have very narrow streets, no street parking, and I've not heard any discussion sort of, and this speaks to the safety not only of the clients of A-Hope, but also the pedestrians who are accessing that area. So those are my sort of three rambling questions.
Great, thank you. Are there any other who'd like to make public comment? Great. If the applicant would come up, do you want to address those two questions about how the design, how does that address safety and security, and have you considered the clientele of Homeward Bound in the project?
Sure, I mean, I guess the second is a pretty large social question that I think is a tough one to tackle, but I think from the design perspective and certainly from the comments we've received from you all in our informal, I think first and foremost, by putting activity on both street frontages is, I think it serves all the communities. It gives life to the streets. It puts eyes on the streets. Certainly, in addition to that, we will have some, building lighting to light up the sidewalk, either through street lighting or additional building accent lighting that will filter out onto the street and add to that from a safety perspective. I think we've made a conscious effort where we can not to create sort of hidden niches in the facade where that kind of create dark sort of scary pockets, and we've brought the building to the street frontage on all sides, and where we do have openings, they're well lit, they're within view of, hotel staff and the hotel lobby, which obviously is a 24-hour operation, so, I think that's kind of been our goal.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
I had some thoughts about that when Stephen Lee was talking about site design and having something on the public, places to sit or things like that. And somebody mentioned that right now the streets were used by people, and like I feel like the more activation we have on a street level, the safer everyone is.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's my opinion.
That's the opinion that I expressed at the neighborhood meeting regarding the other development that will happen south of Homeward Bound. And I received some disagreement from the board members of Homeward Bound on that item. I remain of the opinion that activation has got to help that situation. My client has indicated that they intend to have a security guard 24/7 at this building. So that will be one of the ways that they, in addition to the lighting and so forth that Matt just mentioned, that will be one of the ways that they deal with keeping everybody safe. And I appreciate that from both sides. As Jeremy and I have both said at this point, we're very familiar with the folks who are unhoused and having to access the services of Homeward Bound. The other aspect comes back to the question of public amenities on the street level and the ability to be able to keep folks off of park benches and be able to clean off the sidewalks and so forth. Because, my experience in 6 years of living across the street was that the sidewalks get used as bathrooms and everything else.
So my only response to that, and in defense of Stephen Lee, is we can't let the actions of one business's clients dictate poor planning and poor public amenities.
Absolutely.
The law needs to be enforced, they need to be removed, or, we have a set of laws, we each need to respect each other. So I think the good design element shouldn't be left off for fear that our public municipality is not enforcing the law.
Absolutely. I first read crime prevention through environmental design in 1986,
Yeah.
working for Public Housing Authority in Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm extremely familiar with the issues, but it's always a challenge.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Well, going to close, public comments closed. We're going to have some, discussion amongst ourselves, I
I
imagine.
think he may have another comment. I think we have.
I know, but I just closed public.
Okay.
While we're waiting for Brian to come back, David, what do you have to say?
I'm wondering, would this look different if A-Hope wasn't there?
I think absolutely, 100%, in my opinion.
Should that conversation be had?
The only way that ends, in my opinion, would be removing A-Hope, not changing the design of the building.
I'm just postulating.
We can't make a private property owner redesign his building.
Right.
If he doesn't want to. We can only make it apply to the rules that are in place. So,
And just following up on your comment about keep pedestrian street, I think we learned from staff that the only additional restriction or regulation that would kick in would be bumping up the storefront or the openings from 50% of the street level facade to 70% of the street level facade. And gosh, it sure looks like Carter Street, it's gotta be 70%. I mean,
I bet it's not. I've had to do 70% on a street front, keep pedestrian street, and you have to have openings all the way down, especially if you have a garage door.
so because of where the sidewalk drops and it's essentially a retaining wall, but the rendering's kind of deceptive. It looks like there's an inset balcony there in the middle.
I think the pedestrian entrance is recessed a little bit, and that's
Yeah,
where the
it's just-
counting.
I mean, I feel like it's pretty well articulated, so I'm surprised to see the number 52%, because it seems a lot higher.
It's really hard. It's really hard to get 70.
But I think Ann Street suffers a little bit more, mostly because of the south end of the building below the retail. I think it would be nice to see more openings, but again, that's the only pushback that a key pedestrian street would give us, apparently.
Well, first I want to thank the applicant for responding to some of the suggested changes that we did make. Maybe not all of them, but it's much appreciated. So my only hesitation, Stephen Lee, or my concern, while I wholeheartedly support the suggestions that you've made, Tony hit it on the head. We've created a process of certainty this is not a conditional zoning situation where we have the ability to arbitrarily require the applicant to do things that aren't required. There's a set of requirements, and if having a green roof is not a requirement for a hotel, I don't see, and I'm worried about the precedent, I'm worried about the future, what if it's a different requirement that someone else has? If we don't provide that level of certainty, then we've created a process that won't be used or that's flawed. Or we open ourselves up to legal action.
I don't see it that way. I think that the way that I presented it was that these are items that need to be explored as part of a design process. As y'all are aware, typically projects of this scale come to us numerous times and way before TRC, and we're able to make these comments. I kind of look at this in some of my comments, if you compare it to like a handicap ramp. If a developer of a hotel were to install a ramp that met ADA going up to their lobby, and their guests were to engage with that, they are not going to meet minimum standards on that. Building code is going to let them do minimum standards. They're going to have pipe rail, and it's beyond minimum standard. I think that this commission was reorganized, this committee was reorganized to review the design characteristics of these properties very carefully, beyond what City Council was capable of doing, beyond what the minimum requirements are, in order to try and improve the overall quality of the hotels going in Asheville. If you look at the hotels that went in, I'm not going to name specifics. If you look at the hotels that have been recently constructed before the development of this committee, they're not any architectural or streetscape feature that I think we feel proud about. And if I'm incorrect, y'all correct me. But again, we were put in place to try to help work with developers, which we do every time, and we get feedback. We give feedback, they come back to the table, and we end up with better products. And if people can go back and look at videos from years ago about this, and you can see how groups have worked together. Like I said, there was an attempt to make this a better process and not have to take developers through a painful process of going through City Council where there wasn't careful thought about design. The suggestions that I bring up in no way reflect a suggestion to spend more cost on construction. These are simple design elements that make it a better project, frankly, make it more marketable. Look at the ballroom of this hotel. Imagine if that was a green roof and what it would do for the value of the hotel rooms looking over on the top of this. You cannot disregard that. I just think that if we, why do we even need to be here? If they've met TRC requirements, good, they're good to go. Y'all have made comments on the architecture that impact cost. They're not in building code. They're not in North Carolina building code. TRC doesn't even look at it. I don't think the site is any different, especially with hotels. And I wish Sage Turner was here right now to help define this, but we have a serious role. And this is not something that's just been brought up today, April 20th. Every single hotel we've reviewed over the last year, we've had the same discussion.
I'll just add that, you you all are basing your decisions off the downtown design guidelines, and that's, I think, the kind of subjective approach to these decisions that, you know, the project meets the CBD zoning and the hotel overlay, and that's kind of the first check, and that's the TRC level review, and then you're here to evaluate the design and make your decisions based on the guidelines.
I think what I'm hearing Stephen, Lee say is that in terms of meeting the requirements, they did a pretty good job, but they just didn't go any farther. They didn't bring anything else other than checking off all the boxes pretty nicely.
Well, and there are negative impacts that are going to be going to public infrastructure with this project. And there are simple ways that could be explored to reduce that. And there are simple things that could be implemented to greatly benefit the community. None of that I see is being done in terms of site. So,
What would you say your top 2 or 3 items to investigate would be
I think,
as a condition of approval?
I think stormwater mitigation, creative and unique stormwater mitigation techniques need to be reviewed with the client, and cost comparatives with traditional subsurface systems versus portions of the roof being a green roof. And I think that rather than basing the standard tree grade, minimum tree size, streetscape detail, there needs to be a creative approach to it. And there needs to be a creative approach to looking at street activation, and I'm not talking about benches. So
those would be the three site conditions. I'm sorry, I'm putting together a.
No, we need to move forward.
The bigger, more important point that I'm hearing Will say is, if we believe what I'm thinking about precedent, I'm thinking about our overall, what our guiding principles as a group. And what I heard him say is, we are charged with you said the overall downtown, say that again.
Downtown design guidelines.
So the overall downtown design guidelines, and so if we feel like some of these requirements are incorporated or part of those design guidelines, then that is our basis of approval or denial, or contributes to it. And I'm okay with that. I just want to identify where it's coming from and why, and I think it's important for all applicants to understand that, because that will also set the bar for the future. So if we're worried about heat islands or other things and ways to mitigate that in any way that we can, then I think that's my opinion.
Yep, understood.
And I'll just say there's a recommendation under other rooftop terraces and green roofs are encouraged. It's not a requirement.
So there you have it. So if you have a situation where it's perfect for that, and we can designate a portion of the roof to achieve that, maybe there is some working together to sort of meet those.
And that's what this group has a history of doing, very successfully.
I don't think we're going to be in a situation, Brian, where we attach some conditions to look at without knowing what the result's going to be. I think, but at least from Stephen Lee's perspective, right?
Well, no, I don't want to. This is a group decision. I mean, I know we all vote, but I think that there's some items with architecturally that may require this to come back.
Well, and we've requested some of these items before without problems. So, I mean, green roof, 72 create, that was,
right.
We suggested that didn't have a problem with TRC.
Right.
Improvements on the site, we suggested that, so it's not like we're being shocking.
When are they scheduled for TRC?
Scheduled for.
When are they scheduled for final TRC?
They haven't submitted for final TRC. That'll come afterwards. They had their initial TRC back in January. They're on the Planning and Zoning Commission agenda in 2 weeks. If it doesn't get approved here and they agree to a continuance, then we would continue that hearing as well.
Oh, so we would put them back? They can't go to P&Z with that before they get approval here?
I don't know.
Not unless they want to keep on going to council and make a conditional zoning.
Well,
yeah.
I thought in the past we've allowed them, I could be confusing my boards and commissions here, but I thought we've allowed that we've set conditions but had them come back
You could have them come back for a courtesy informal.
But it was
For
courtesy
courtesy.
review to make sure they picked it up. Like, for example, I requested that the applicant make some revisions basically to the north and south elevations, and we talked about different things they could do. I would make that a condition of my approval today, assuming I'm making the motion since I'm writing crap down. And so I would make that a condition, and then we would have a courtesy review. Yes, that's what we meant.
So my understanding, though, of process was, an approval is an approval. It wasn't a conditional approval. The courtesy review, if they didn't do what you asked, it could still be approved, wasn't, right?
There are a few ways of handling it. I think in the past, we've been successful in the way that Brian's described it, so that a condition was made, and they made revisions to the plans prior to planning and zoning. We actually even emailed the plans around to the committee, and you all provided some feedback whether it met the intent or not, and we could convey that to planning and zoning. And then they would come back for an informal review just to kind of follow up on that. I think
The other option
there's
is
a
just to get
possibility that they
continued.
might not address your comments, and then the approval's given. So I think it depends on the nature of the comments and the conditions.
Okay, so, there's one thing to say, articulate the north elevation a little bit more than you have. It's another thing to say, we want you to look at doing a green roof, say, over the piece on Ann Street. I'm just pulling out a portion of the project. It's a big flat roof. That's a short span. It would be real simple to do. That's like,
Well, and all the guests would be looking down on it.
yeah, right.
It's amenity.
So, and then they go, yeah, we looked at it. No, thanks. So what you're saying is that at that point, we would be.
That other project was not a
makes-
hotel.
Do what?
That other project was an apartment complex.
Wasn't a hotel.
So it was voluntary compliance.
Oh, it was. Okay, I'm trying to remember.
The hotel we said had a green roof is gonna have a green roof.
Yeah.
What if the condition was that they reduce their exporting of stormwater by 10% over a baseline? Or what if we can create a bar that gives them latitude to meet it?
Different strategies.
And hopefully it'll be a green roof over that lower one, but then we are clear, you need to reduce your stormwater impact, and
I think it's.
that's one of your lists.
Yeah, I think it's much further than reducing the volume of water.
I can't remember, I don't have the guideline, but there's a sustainability guideline in the downtown guidelines that green roof is one of the strategies, but it's only one. And it meets several different strategies of reducing urban heat island and some of the stuff that
Right.
you were talking about.
And green roof's not the answer for every project. Like, there are other hotels that have a 20,000 gallon rainwater harvesting system, and they use
Right.
it for their site irrigation and non-potable water use.
Right.
They use it, but it's that extra effort that, like I said, all these hotels could just simply go to city council and we'd be done. We wouldn't have to have this discussion. And then they'd be at a dead stop. But here's a group that we're trying to work together, not create substantial additional costs. It's about design and careful thinking.
Okay.
I hear you, I'm just thinking of a way we can vote with enforceable conditions. So could we say
Or we
10%
just-
of the roof has to be green
Or
roof?
we just ask the applicant what they
I was
want
about
to
to
do.
say, the applicant, I don't know who wants to speak for the applicant. I understand is delaying an option before going to P&Z? Is it even an option to sort of try to work on these few issues together and come back here? And if we have to have a special meeting that's sooner, I'm sure we can talk about doing that.
Yeah, we
but-
do. We have had special meetings of this group. and
Yeah, we could definitely
I
call
would be
one.
open to doing that,
I think technically, and I'm a little bit out of my depth on the legalese of this, but it's possible the project could go to Planning and Zoning Commission for their site plan review, which is based only on really the CBD zoning requirements, and they could affirm their site plan compliance with the zoning code, but still have to get approval from you all in order to kind of check that box for final
The only issue there
design
is if
approval.
we require, or there's a change that requires them to go back to
Correct.
P&Z.
If there's a substantive
Yeah,
site,
that's the
site
only
level plan
problem with that.
change. So yeah, it is get a little chicken and egg at that point.
Right. So, I asked the question because I don't know how a vote will come out.
Well, I would add that, as you're going to address that I would like a commitment to improving the fenestration on both the south and north facades.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to quantify that, but it sounds like there's room definitely on the south facade for more glass.
It sounds like if the changes are
Yeah, I
something
mean,
that's
so I
hard
guess
to
my
condition.
question to the applicant is it an option to kind of flesh out some of these issues and see if there's any opportunity to incorporate some of these suggestions and come back before us? Or do you want us to vote on it now as is, regardless?
I understand correctly, is this happen before P and Z, or otherwise it would delay P and Z?
Well,
I
you
think
got
it
2
would
weeks
del-
till between now
Right.
and P and Z, and you could, I mean, we could meet, next week or something, we can even do an online meeting or something. We've done this in the past.
We need some
and
time
we
for
can
public
vote.
notice requirements.
Yeah,
so it's
there are
a
some public-
couple of weeks out. So I don't know if we're gonna be able to convene a special meeting of this
Yeah.
group prior to Planning and Zoning Commission. That's getting
It would delay
tight.
P and Z probably.
As I say, we're certainly committed to working with you, we just don't want to, we're trying to not impact that P and Z schedule, so, I think certainly the.
So P and Z is your last stop.
Articulation, I'm sorry?
P and Z is your last stop. If
Right.
you,
Because you're
it may
entitled,
make sense to it may make sense to,
are they entitled after P and Z? Is that what they're trying to get to? Is that what you're trying to get
Still have
to?
to go to,
You gotta go to final
Final
TRC,
final
right?
TRC.
Yeah, final TRC is the technical review, final approval, which, once all those comments are addressed, the zoning permit can be issued. Entitlement technically happens at Planning and Zoning Commission. We could check going forward about the possibility of them going to Planning and Zoning first before getting design review approval. I think they would be, it gets a little tricky, and.
we're talking about some potential site changes though, which would
Yeah,
affect P
so-
and Z. So I don't think it would make
Right.
sense. I would think it would make more sense to bump the P and Z. Let's try to get.
But
a
the things
positive-
we're talking about would be like exceeding.
Yeah, but you may be doing some site changes on the outside, which the P and Z has to approve, sign off on. So if you do something that changes that.
If they add a couple more trees, that's just an amendment though, yeah?
It's gonna depend on things like, I think substantive changes that, like changing the amount of uses would be different, so that, I don't think if that's being considered.
We're not talking about driveway cuts, we're not talking about uses.
Right.
That we would be talking about
I mean, it might have to
basically.
we have to see it and then go from there. They might have to, if they want to go to planning and zoning in a couple of weeks ahead first, and they could, and then if they come back with a new design that the DRC finds amenable, then at that point, we might say, well, actually, you have to go back to planning and zoning anyway. It's a little hard to say without seeing it and really getting into it. My gut is that the changes would not be substantive enough to need to get a site plan review again. But I can't say for sure without knowing what those are.
They're rolling the dice.
A little bit. It could save them a month, or they could end up in the same position as they were with having to be delayed, and I mean.
So they can either take a delay now, or they can roll the dice, go to P and Z and come back to us. And assuming that whatever changes they make are not substantial enough to require going back through P and Z, they could keep going. But they might have to run back through P and Z after.
Yeah, and I
Or
don't
they
think we
could
have
say,
to.
we just want you to vote.
I don't think we have to
And
decide.
they'll go traditional zoning route.
Here we go.
Well, I think if you voted to approve it and didn't get a pass, you could then make a vote to continue with their advisement. If they didn't want to vote, if they don't want to be continued after a vote to approve failed, then they'd be out of this cycle and they'd be going to city council. I don't think we have to have an answer to going to planning and zoning next couple weeks or not today. I think it's really just, do you all approve the plans? Do you continue it till the next meeting for the design review committee? And then we can work in the meantime with, I think, legal staff too, to determine whether they even can go to planning and zoning without DRC approval. I don't think we have to send them to planning and zoning today. We just have to decide whether it continues the design review committee for a month.
Understood. Okay.
Or or you approve the design now.
Okay, so
I'd love it if the applicant
with the applicant,
suggested all this and made some sort of amendment to the application that checked off all the boxes and gave everybody the right latitudes and is enforceable, if there's a way to do that, right?
So from a site standpoint, I would definitely commit to what we discussed about potentially increasing the number of trees. And I think we can also commit to a different paving pattern outside of the required 10-foot sidewalk, which we'll have on both sides of the building.
Different paving pattern, what way?
Maybe pavers or something like that, something outside of just your standard running bond pattern concrete, which is the city standard, and basically we're being forced to use. You know, as I said, the plan that I showed a minute ago, the site plan shows something different. And when I inquired about doing that, I was told at this point, I'm still required to use the running bond pattern, which is a horrible pattern, but what's that?
In terms of increasing permeability, is that where you're going?
I'm just talking about a different paving pattern.
Oh, just aesthetics.
Correct. And I think that to some extent addresses what Mr. Johnson was asking about earlier.
I mean, the real issue is, though, if we have committee members who are not prepared to approve until they see some of the suggested changes, either the north or south.
Yeah,
I mean, can you say, I'll approve it, subject to you doing it, but you may want to see it? I don't know. I can't speak for you, but.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if anybody, I mean, I asked for some substantial changes to the Ann Street piece and the north and south elevations.
So I think we want to see it again before, I'm getting the sense that it may not get approval if we're asked to vote on it. But we will vote on it if the applicant wants us to. Or would you be willing to come back? And we understand it does delay your P and Z, or it doesn't have to delay your P and Z meeting, just to delay this.
I'll put my cards down. I'm not gonna approve it today based on the design as it is. I trust the applicant is going to address those issues, but I wanna see what they are before I'm gonna approve it. There we go. But I'm just one vote.
I think we know where Stephen is. Should we just keep doing this so the applicant knows what choice to make?
Sounds like you're making a vote, basically.
No, we're just.
If I were to vote.
If we
at this
vote,
point.
yeah, what is that?
I don't know. I think it's probably arbitrary because you can all just say, well, I'm not going to approve it if it's not a vote. I mean, I don't know.
If you don't.
I think we certainly will work.
My sense is this project will get approved if some of these changes are incorporated into it. And that is our goal, is to try to help you make the project better and to approve it and to get you through without having to go to city council. But I think you need to make some of these changes. That's my sense. And would you rather do that, or would you rather us vote on it now, without doing that?
We can certainly commit to the elevation changes and studying that further. I think some additional detail of the pool amenity deck and the restaurant, rooftop restaurant amenity area may provide more insight to help get everybody more comfortable with, the kind of plantings and things that we're talking about.
Plantings are not green roofs.
I know it's not green roofs, but I mean, again, we're trying to work with you and have give and take from both sides. So I think we are committed to providing more information, doing everything we can, and, in good faith to improve the project further.
I make that comment only because I've heard it before from other committee members who are not here as well, that while it may look pretty and nice, it doesn't perform the function, the reason why it's being asked for. So
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. There's lots of technical aspects to green roofs versus plantings, but I think regardless, I think we can provide more information on those public amenity areas that are outside, as well as the elevation facade items that we talked about. Our preference is certainly not to delay the schedule, and because there's a overall project schedule that we're committed to, but I think we can certainly work with you to.
So what I'm hearing Will say is you could still go to P and Z even if you have to come back to us.
But that's an option, I think.
It's possible.
How can that be possible? P&Z can't approve it unless we have your approval.
That's the question. He's not sure about that. He thinks that.
I think they can.
Yeah.
And I think we can even work with planning and zoning to develop a condition that incorporates some of the changes that you're talking about, so that they respect the fact that there's discussions going on certain items, but that it wouldn't disturb their approval.
Right.
Their approvals,
It's the rolling of the dice that we were talking
Right.
about. They can approve it, but if the changes that we ask for, in order for them to meet them, triggers a re-review. So they would
Right.
have to go back to PNC.
That's kind of
rolling
my
the
read
dice.
on it. So planning and zoning could affirm the site plan zoning level, but then the design review committee would still have to approve the design in order to bypass city council review of it. And I think those could happen interchangeably. If the changes were changes to the site plan, you might have to go back to planning zoning anyway, but it would save you a couple of weeks. I mean, it wouldn't really change your schedule. You still have to be here on May 19th to get the design review committee's approval instead of the final June 7th planning and zoning. So it'd save you 1, 2, 3.5 weeks,
So I think,
or 2.5.
I think we can do whatever is easiest. We don't want to take a vote today. We want to obviously work to
and understand, I think people want to get you
Right.
what you want, but
right. So I mean,
with some,
if the process dictates that we need to delay P and Z, I think we can do that. I think if that process, working with you all, begins to drag out beyond 1 or 2 more P and Zs, then I think we maybe have the discussion again. But I think for now, just to keep it straightforward and the process clean, we can delay that P and Z and plan to meet with you all in a few weeks with some improvements.
Yeah, sounds like there's a clear understanding of what the committee's looking for. I don't think, it's not unusual for a project of this scale to be continued for a meeting.
Sure.
yeah, I think the patent, 3 times?
A couple of those projects.
We're
take a
not
while.
trying to do
I
that.
love National.
We're not trying to do that. I think there are some very specific suggestions that,
No,
if you're able to
absolutely.
incorporate, would be pretty helpful.
Understood.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
It is
Aren't you glad you
2:26.
shared?
I love it. So,
Yeah, you all need the vote
So-
to continue it.
do I have a motion to continue this item? Would someone like to make a motion?
Continue.
Oh, I move that we continue what is the name of the project? Carter Street Tribute Hotel.
To the May 19th meeting.
Do what?
May 19th.
To the May 19th meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
The
motion
record's
passes.
the May 18th meeting. but-
So, Will, it's 2:27. I have to leave here in about 12 minutes.
Okay.
I can keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have, I'm going to start the discussion. We have an informal design review for 226 Hilliard called the Duke. It's a level 2. I'm going to use the restroom while you start.
Do you want to call a short recess for
Yes,
folks
that would be
to
wonderful.
take a break?
Oh, yeah, let's just take a 5-minute recess. 2:27.
Yeah, I see some time.
They didn't even, there's been no, there's no discussion about stormwater. He didn't even ask.
Yeah, it's just a little two-finger scroll to go up and down. Zoom in that. Yep, he's got it.
He does.
Thank you, Will. Do you want to show anything on this, or not really?
Nah, I just was making a point, I can do it, holding it up. So, and I won't take, we won't take very long.
All right, yeah. No, thanks for sitting through all that.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's still gonna have to be state requirements, but housing needs that, they decide.
Quality quantity control, he hasn't even thought about it.
But he's got the parts of the building
those long parts.
Yeah,
You could make the entire thing on Main Street, like,
he's
like, just
he's
easy.
in marketing wise, could pay for himself like that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, I'm sorry if we didn't.
I think there's companies that market this as well, but the fact that, most projects come here 3-4 times. That's it. And, it's like,
We need to talk.
well, and Tony was part of the water, the whole, like, meeting of MOTRC requirements, we're meeting the minimum requirements, it's what's in the meeting. It's like, good for you, you're meeting the minimum requirements. Right, we have downtown design guidelines that go beyond that.
And we're the
They suggest
final
you need to
arbiter.
innovate stormwater management techniques.
Right.
And ways to activate policies. And just,
I'm sorry.
just.
So where do you think the property line is relative to the curb? I was kind of.
It's a building.
There were two property lines on some of the drawings. It's like they had moved them over, and so I didn't know where we were.
Yeah.
I didn't know where we were.
If we, bridge something like that, this is. Why are these here? We do, and it's something that you have to wax it plus you do. It totally is.
And that's the biggest thing, is like everybody asking for great big site, like nature, I know it's.
Well, I want to design.
It's like, oh, I know, so
I just want to make sure that we try to fix it in that way.
I knew what you were doing, because you said we have this as soon as.
Oh, yeah. So I'm like, okay, we're doing this, we are allowed to do this because of this. And that's a pretty broad other. It's precedent for everyone else that comes out.
Well, it's obviously, it's subjective. I mean, it's different when they decide to sue something.
It's not arbitrary, it's subjective within what our rules are.
It's subjective.
You know?
It's just like.
Don't hit me with that hammer.
And it says, hey, whatever infers into the downtown master plan, heat islands, green roofs or curves, we're following.
Property line is inboard of the tree grades.
So Christina, I'm gonna hand the gavel over to you. All you have to do is say you have a motion to adjourn, everyone will vote.
Yeah, because this is not.
Because I'm gonna leave here in a few
You don't
minutes.
have to do that. You don't have to herd the cats, you just might have to tell me to shut up,
Okay.
which everybody seems to
So-
enjoy.
Okay, are we all back?
I can't.
Michael's not here.
Oh. Okay. Will, when we go over 2 hours,
Yeah.
you get snacks for your committee members.
Start doing that.
A little chocolates, or
Especially chocolate.
some seltzer,
Especially chocolate.
okay? That's our new rule. Right?
Love it,
Have a
love it.
motion and a second on that
Second.
one? Yeah.
CDC is really wishing they had done that.
It's a hotel project, we should just assume.
You gotta keep us
we need
happy.
lunch, I know. It's like, oh, it's only one formal item, can't be that.
Okay, we're gonna call back to order at 2:33. Hey, Chris.
Hey there. Pretty hot.
Are you happy?
Congratulations, Chair Goldstein.
Oh, thank you so much.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you folks with this project, and will not take up too much time. This is
For the
informal.
record, you are?
Yes, my name is Chris Day. I'm with Civil Design Concepts. I am here with my developer, Brian Wise. Also got Sean Sains from my office and Brian Slevar, the architect. So, interestingly enough, we came before you guys 1 year ago tomorrow with this site that looked like this.
Yeah.
And we heard comments like concerns about the length of the building, looking for something to be less of a fortress, how to break up the building and create connectivity to the courtyard. So we now have this. So the project has evolved. It's had a lot of iterations and changes. But what this really does is it focuses. It's an adaptive reuse of the existing building that's out on site, the old Hayes and Lunsford building, as well as focusing the new construction up at the intersection of Hilliard and Avenue to be respectful of the neighbors that we have. We're actually adjacent to residential zoning, single-family residential zoning in the back of this project. So we've had 3 neighborhood meetings, and this one was without a doubt, they were very pleased with the level of it. It starts with basically the ground level, the ground surface. So we are saving this existing building, and here's a picture of the old Hayes and Lunsford building that was there. I'll let y'all pass that around while we're talking. But basically, Hilliard Avenue, the elevation drops as you come down Ashland, and so we're coming in and creating a new intersection that aligns with Grove Street to bring all of our traffic into this site. That's our only opening for the traffic. And then we have we're utilizing the basement of the old Hayes and Lunsford for parking. It's residential parking, and so we're actually doing some tandem parking spaces because those will be assigned spaces. And then we've got, in essence, a surface parking lot here on the ground that we then come back and place a residential building over the top of. In addition to the residential building, we've got a small addition to the old Hayes and Lunsford building. That does a couple of things. It gives us an elevator. It also increases our frontage of space along the Hilliard Avenue. We do have, we've got a unique situation here, or not unique on Hilliard in the fact that we are proposing our trees and tree grates. We have a little bit of area up against the building to put some ground cover and landscaping. But then because of the geometry of the parcel and the right-of-way of Ashland, we got rid of the tree grates along the curb line, and we pulled the street trees in. And then when we got outside of the right-of-way, we've kind of taken the opportunity to put a lot more interest in ground cover going above and beyond the zoning minimum there with some
A lot of buzzwords in this presentation.
with some ground cover, some other trees and so forth. And then just in general, the site currently out there is a lot of pavement. And while I know surface lots aren't really sexy, what we've done is pulled them to the back of the site, but it also gives us a lot of opportunities to create areas of green where we can infiltrate stormwater. And so we are going to be a reduction when we get done with this from the built upon area that's out there today. This, you can kind of see the building is showing where the parking is underneath it, and that's where things get a little interesting. So along this is Hilliard Avenue here, and then Ashland. Along Hilliard, we have created, that's Ashland, sorry. Along Hilliard, and I'll let Brian Sleevar get up and talk a little bit about it, but the opening back up the historical storefront that you see in that picture that you see here, this area in between is a kind of a courtyard in between the buildings that also provides entryway in. From some of the other versions we've had at the city, we've also introduced an accessible door along the key street of Hilliard. And then all of these are residential on this side. So the existing Hayes and Lunsford building will become commercial on the street with residential back behind it. So then kind of right now, this opening with the gate, we're looking at some type of, and I'm not trying to sound architect-y, some kind of metal grate fencing panels here with the idea that as we kind of turn the corner and the elevation drops off, we will utilize that.
Sorry, Chris, we have lost all.
So with the idea.
One on at a time, apparently.
So when, we'll take the kind of this same type fencing metal panels at the entrance there to the courtyard and kind of use that, and it doesn't really show up in this initial rendering as well, but kind of use that along the ground plane to kind of help screen and hide the surface parking back there, as well as the landscaping that I had shown in that excessive right-of-way that we have there. So with that being said, I'll open it up for comments and invite Brian Slevar, the architect, to be up here to talk about materials and other architecty type stuff.
Would you like to start with site again and just?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do site,
Yes,
and then we'll
Chris's.
do that.
So,
Already there.
thank you, Chris. So I think what is really interesting about this second round is the reuse of the existing building. In terms of sustainability, I think that it's huge. Obviously, we need as much housing as possible, but in terms of design, I think that's kind of game-changing for this site, and just opening it up and letting it breathe some, and then also all along Ashland, being able to get those trees in dirt changes that pedestrian experience a little bit. Hilliard is really heavily traveled by pedestrians, and I can completely understand the need of tree grates in that area, just to open that up as much as possible. So I think that this is a better project, and I think looks good.
Thank you.
Site-wise.
Thank you. I wanted to point out one more thing, as you made reference, Stephen Lee. So that we do have the residential neighborhood in the rear here, and it's our intention not to introduce vehicular traffic here. We're working with fire and public works as to, how bicycles can still use this. We were really tight, and we've got a lot of grade change here to try and create a pedestrian route up the old kind of pseudo Grove Street. So what we've done is we've created a sidewalk here along the south end so that folks from the neighborhood have an ability to get out to Ashland Avenue, which is a key pedestrian corridor. And so, like right now, it's there. If you live on this street on South Grove Street, you have no way to get to the central business district without walking way down and around.
Will that be connected to the rest of the property, or will that sidewalk be kind of isolated?
There is connectivity in here. I'm not sure if we'll have some type of fencing to promote, or we haven't kind of figured that out, but we did want to take the opportunity to kind of create an accessible route that followed the grade plane, as opposed to trying to promote folks walking up the drive aisle.
I don't understand what's going on in the middle of the site, where you've got the 3 trees and there's the stairs between the 2 buildings. There's a lot of paving, and I know you haven't designed it all yet, but can you describe what in the world's going on there with those stairs and stuff?
Brian Slevar, hit me if I say something wrong here. So as you come in from the Hilliard sidewalk and into this courtyard area, the steps that you see right here go up, and will access the roof, and then this set of stairs will come down to access the surface parking in this area.
Are there going to be
parking? This is green. This is green.
Any kind of amenities in that space for residents type stuff?
So right now, come on up, Brian.
Yeah, Brian Slever with Carmina Wood Design. So basically, where we're going to come in at the courtyard, you're coming in roughly about the street elevation of that main front of the building, but then there's 2 levels below that.
Right.
So the ground floor is going to be parking, and then that kind of middle floor is going to be apartments. So we're still exploring structurally what we can do with the existing building, but it seems that it's all just concrete columns and beams, so we should be able to open it up pretty well. So I think as we kind of continue to develop that part, there could be amenity spaces. There might be balconies that are coming off of that inside face. So we're still kind of exploring with our structural engineer the options there.
And what's going on? What are you planning on designing in that space, that courtyard space, Chris? I mean, what is that going to be?
We haven't completely decided that, you know,
Rain garden.
we,
And I'm assuming that entire space, this is where I was going with the connectivity kind of question, is that I'm assuming whatever you design there's for the residents, not for general public? Or is there, like, are you gonna, and I know this is a different design, but in the previous design, there was kind of this idea we're gonna have like retail and stuff, you know, and bring people in and through. That's kind of what I'm asking. That space between the buildings, is that gonna be activated public space? Is it gonna be activated resident space?
Yeah, so I think both. So right now, that courtyard kind of serves dual purpose. It serves as a way to roll into the site, access the commercial space that would be there. We still have the potential to have an entrance truly on Hilliard, or a secondary entrance, or the main entrance off of the courtyard. And then you have basically like a retaining wall at the back of that courtyard. And you're gonna have stairs that go up to the rooftop feature, which is going to do dual purpose amenity space for the residents, but also serve the commercial space. So we're thinking, you know.
So why have the gate? I understand having a portal, but why have the gate if it's for public use?
it's really more of, and I'll let you speak to it, Brian, but it's really more to help kind of, it's not closed, and during the day it would be open, but it's really, it's a large stance there, and it was really to help define.
Yeah, like I said, I understand having a portal, but I'm asking like, why is it being closed off if it's for public use? Or is this?
I think it's not so much that it's meant to be closed off. I think it's supposed to try to bridge the two buildings together, the existing and the new. And I think we're trying to get that frontage.
Yeah.
And I think the way we're showing it, maybe it could be a little bit wider so that it's not meant to be this, you know.
Yeah, we'll get into the building design. I was just trying to make sure I understood what was going on in there, and like whether that's, that looks cool, I'm supposed to go through, or, oh, that's not for me. That was my question. And then, one last site question. On the other side of the building, to the right of the diagram we're looking at, go back to the site plan, there's another big concrete area, on your site plan,
Over here.
to the, on the other side of the existing building. What is that gonna be?
That is, currently what's out there right now is a small loading dock pad.
Right.
And our plan is to expand upon that and make that sort of an outdoor patio, again, outdoor space for the commercial component.
Okay, like outdoor dining-ish kind of
Yeah.
space?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Is Grove Street a street, or is that a private driveway?
It's a private driveway, but we wanted to, it was closed. So it's open to the north as Grove Street, it's open to the south as South Grove Street, but technically.
But this piece in between is.
There's a.
When was it closed?
I don't know, I don't know if it was Hazen Lunsford that closed it or Duke Energy that closed it, but, right now it's fenced off, and you can kind of see on the site plan where the existing right-of-way goes up. It kind of, it dips into it right now. There is a public water line that traverses down that area, so we'll be maintaining that as a, public water line through there.
So.
But it's not, we're not opening it up as a.
South of the property, there's some bollards there. Is it paved up to the south end of the property? Is Grove Street paved?
Grove Street is paved, yes.
So you have an existing alleyway that will hit some bollards
Correct.
as it becomes a private driveway?
Correct. So today, as you go up South Grove Street, you run into a fence. You run into a chain link fence. And so we're looking to open it up so that, you know, bicycles or whatever from the neighborhood can.
But no cars?
No cars. We're not looking to introduce that to the neighborhood.
This can be a huge plus for Dutton Street right there. They're like blocked right now.
Yeah.
Huge.
So we got a lot of positive comments from the neighbors about that. We're working through the logistics with fire as to, you know, the idea is that there'd be some kind of a Knox box there that fire and emergency vehicles could open it up, but that we just didn't want our residents impacting that neighborhood.
And the office business zoning district to the south, what are the buffer requirements, if any, between those two?
I don't think, that we have buffer requirements and height setbacks on the single-family residential zoning, but the office, I don't think we have no buffer required there, but we're looking to place some vegetation on that side. And through conversations with the neighbors, where we had some flexibility on where we put planting materials for tree canopy and so forth, we focused them in that southwest corner towards the residential.
So the primary pedestrian entrance is on Hilliard? That's the primary pedestrian entrance for the new building?
There is not a pedestrian entrance on Ashland. So
Or at the corner, right, okay.
So we've got it on Hilliard, as well as they can enter in through that gated courtyard area.
Okay.
The grade just drops off pretty significantly going down Ashland to try and make something work down through there.
And how did you, so the new building's essentially an L shape, and it sits square to Hilliard. What was the thought about whether it was going to sit square to Ashland versus Hilliard?
Just from a site perspective, the geometry worked better to do the long section and that's really the more pedestrian focused currently, and with more residents going in across the street and so forth, we were focusing.
I mean, you could rotate the building footprint. I'm just wondering.
You could.
In my head, I'm thinking, what would happen if it rotated clockwise and it kind of sat square to Ashland?
It starts to really pull off of Hilliard with a lot.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It actually pushes it
No,
back.
yeah, one of the things we were trying to do with the larger right-of-way that was on Ashland was to sort of set the building back a little bit. And when we were working through, one of the biggest challenges has been the grade changes in the elevation points. So when we got this building in here, it really kind of lent itself to front on Hilliard more square. And then as we were digging into design, that wedge that kind of happened between the right-of-way, the property line and the face of the building on Ashland, I think one of the last comments we had last time was the importance of that corner and trying to make it a little bit more of a nicer public spot. So our initial thought was that became this landscape area, give it a little bit of buffer. There's balconies on that side that are right there on the street. So to try to give it a little bit more room is why we chose to square up on Hilliard. And then also for the entrance point, it's a lot flatter on Hilliard. So Ashland was really tough to get something that worked.
Yeah, I was hoping for a deeper reason. Yeah, it seems like you could pivot the building and crunch the space a little bit and set.
Sorry, can I add to that to get to your, just because I was
Sure.
involved more on the
Yeah.
Sean Sains from Civil Design Concepts. At least on our side, we wanted to line it up with the existing building so that it created a consistent fabric of this existing building and not overpower that building. And that's also why the new one is set back aligned with it as well. So it just kind of created this this consistent street frontage as you're enjoying it.
Well, if it wasn't sitting up on legs on the south corner, the sidewalk pulls in closer to the building, and you're starting to kind of be underneath the building to some degree as you get closer to it.
Yeah.
So you're being brought closer to the parking lot.
I guess we're getting into architecture. Oh boy.
I'm not advocating for one or the other, I'm just wondering,
So I appreciate the piece that you're doing on the Hazen Lunsford building, and I can't tell what I think about the rest of it. I'm getting the site plan. I am not quite understanding the floating leg piece and the building organization. Well, so I've got three significant issues. The floating, the way the building is completely kind of cut off from the site and floats, and the spacing of nothing's really lining up. It's sitting on a podium, but the podium doesn't really have anything to do with the pieces that are above it. And then there's no expression of the podium itself is just isolated. So there's that piece, the way it connects. There is there's the massing and color of the building itself, which I'll speak more about, and then there's the fenestration. Those 9/1 kind of single hung, double hung windows are, I don't know. It doesn't look urban.
They look historical to me too, in this modern
Yeah,
panel.
it was really like, I was like, what is throwing me off? And I think it's partly that. And then like there's some fun stuff going on with like the way you were doing some things where like if you pushed a piece of the building in, it changed color, but then it was not consistent. And so I feel like you're doing several things, but you don't know which ones you want to do the most. I don't know how else to articulate that. Maybe somebody can help me with what I'm seeing.
It's lacking hierarchy in that regard.
But it's like, wow, that could be, like, so that I'm looking at this corner, that L-shaped piece, you kind of got this wrapped piece that goes around, and then you've got, and that blue piece is expressed, and then the gray piece is kind of pushed in, and then another one's pushed in further. But then that logic doesn't keep going. And so there's like aspects to this that I'm like, well, that was a good move, but then it's not, that logic is not continued throughout the design. I don't know if I'm making any sense. So I would say that my main issues with it is that one, I was like, well, I really kind of like what you did over here on the Hayes and Lunsford piece. Let's just do more of that. I would like to see it less residential in the fenestration and the choices you made there, and obviously would like to see more variation in those and how you did that. And then I don't think the building knows how it's floating right now. That's just not working.
I think the windows, I mean, the Hayes and Lunford building is this old manufacturing, like, I think that kind of window in this metal panel that you're suggesting, I mean, I'm not that large, but a different kind of more industrial feeling window.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that when you get off the podium, there was something, because it looks like, and this is early, but it looks like it goes straight from the air to metal panel.
Yeah.
So if there was something there, because it feels really thin, because those balconies are thin, and it just feels like, I know it won't fall down, but it feels like it needs something with oomph there to separate the podium. Yeah.
And a lot of that, and again, we're here informally, so we wanted to get that idea. But I think a lot of where we have been trying to find the right way to do things is especially along that podium edge down. And we have a couple of conditions where we get into blank walls, we get into solid components, we get into the garage, or not the garage, the parking area. How open is that? How close is it? And I think our hope is eventually that this becomes that wedge between the bottom of the podium and the street base. It all becomes this landscape, this kind of urban, I don't want to say jungle, but some sort of green expression that fills that void. Because yes, right now we're basically our flat podium, everything's coming down. We've been going back and forth with how those components come all the way down to the ground. But then we run into a lot of the site issues with the blank walls and all that. So I agree. It's thin. We need to continue to develop that. I think part of the eclecticness of how some of this stuff comes together stems from our previous reviews of it being too much of the same, too corporate, too strict. So we tried to go more of that industrial panel, feed off of the brick building, the existing building. And go residential. I mean, it is a residential building, so we have to, we're using residential windows for ventilation purposes and natural ventilation and all that. We can totally explore the mullions again. We did try to pick up on something with that historic thing, and we've played with larger proportion buttons and smaller.
Just different window sizes. There's a lot of things you can.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the windows actually are pretty tall, like compared to the floor to floor, that we have in there with our 9-foot ceilings. The heads of the windows are at 8 feet. I mean, they're pretty big. And I think again,
if the bottom sash had 9 by 9 too? I even think
Yep.
that might make it look more like
We
an
look,
old
they're
industrial.
actually hidden in the model, because
Oh,
they are
okay.
there.
All right.
So
I think
that,
that might make it look like an old
So they're
manufacturing
technically
one.
functioning double-hung windows?
oh, yeah, they're operable windows. Yeah, we do them for natural ventilation for everybody in there. They've got sliding doors for the patios, for the balconies. Again, we tried to make this, a lot of what we heard last time was more of the, make it eclectic, make it look like a bunch of small buildings. So we truly tried to break this thing up both horizontally and vertically. But as you all know, we're still limited by what we can do with wood and all that kind of stuff. So we really tried to be mindful of both our clients, bottom line and aesthetically what we can do and physically.
I think to Brian's point though, the corner with that light blue part, I think is more successful than some of the other parts. So set up a rule system, just be really strict with yourself and be like, if it pushes in 2 feet, it does this. If
Yeah.
it pulls out, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm.
Yeah, I think that,
Yeah.
then you set it up and it's kind of fun for you, because you're like, oh, what are my rules? And then, I think it'll inform it a little bit.
Are you planning to screen down Ashland, or do you have ventilation issues?
Are we planning to what down there?
To screen where you have the
garage.
Yeah, right now we're showing some type of screening from a security standpoint, but still very open.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just not showing it.
Something, because obviously we can't have somebody fall down that wedge, but yeah, we're trying to fill that in. And again, that wedge has really been the crux of what we've been looking at doing. But yeah, right now we're showing all those infills screened and including the open end on Ashland.
So does it have like John Wayne themed stuff inside? Is that why it's called the Duke?
Why is it called the Duke?
I think Duke.
It's currently owned by Duke Energy.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay. That is
But
way more disappointing.
It's catching on.
Well, I think what you. I think the changes you made, aside from like aesthetic, the major moves, I think are creating a lot more interesting interstitial spaces, which to me is really exciting. We see a lot of like podium buildings that are, have a pool in the middle or wrapped around parking. So this is really exciting to see some attempt at something more interesting and breaking up the buildings and allowing some circulation around the site. So that part is really exciting. And I think the facade and that, I would love to see retail along Ashland, but I know, you have your parking and requirements and the slope is making it difficult, but I just do want to applaud the breaking up of the spaces and having those interstitial spaces. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think when we sort of took the density out of the project, it opened up and got really exciting about the outdoor spaces, the rooftop component, the patio, the vertical open stairs that we have. It started to become way more, I think, fitting of this site.
I'll jump in with a couple of comments. The comment about rules is exactly right. I think this is a great project for setting some rules, and you can have a whole bunch of them, right? Because to the earlier point, this is, it is playful and it's colorful and it's got that, it's sort of the opposite of what we looked at in the or what the comment wasn't on the earlier project, but I, just sort of following, like there's this yellow highlight that snakes around, but sometimes it's around the green on the inside, sometimes on the outside, sometimes it's just in the blue. So there's just, I think it needs some rules. I would also like to see a little bit more of a reference to the existing building has, looks like in the rendering, it's a brick veneer, but that doesn't exist anywhere else. And, we were just talking about how the towers, those vertical elements are just floating and they really need to come down. And there are, I think you've got opportunities to use that same brick particularly at, down at the base in some of the detailing. Right now, when you look at the head-on elevation, the existing building is on one side and the, new building is on the other, and there's a reference that sort of goes behind there, but that's way in the back, right? So where the new building comes in, there's no response to the existing building. You've got that gateway, but the architecture on the new side isn't responding to what's there. And that, you could do something with, even if you're just doing, using the material, the brick material on that corner, same at the, use that at the corners, and then use that brick material to receive those vertical elements that are, right now, are very expressive, but are just floating.
Yeah, and I think again, going back to that wedge on Ashland, that was all masonry before it was tiered, and kind of all those forms did come down to the ground. And then again, we ran into all these blank wall issues and working with the city on it. So I don't disagree with anything he said. I think.
Well, why does it have to be a blank wall? The structure comes down and you just carve a hole in it.
I forget why we had that linear foot.
Well, but what he's saying is like, okay, you take those two verticals, you bring them down, and instead of putting a window there, you literally cut up, just.
Oh, yeah,
cut
no,
in so that,
for sure.
And you still have like a screening element in that, so it's now, connecting it to the ground, but it's given, interest. And again,
Yeah, I mean, I think this architecture before was grounded, and then through the development of that ground floor, we removed it. So I agree, we have to find a way to pick that back up.
Or,
yeah.
Or maybe a hybrid of it.
Land it. I mean, I don't have a huge issue with the idea that you have a light, transparent podium. It's just right now it's completely so disconnected from the rest of the building that I'm like, whoa, that's.
The building doesn't seem to know that it's got a transparent podium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
Looks like
spaceship
bad
that extended
soil.
landing gear.
Yeah, like it's really bad soil and you had to rise above it.
We're at the beach.
There you go, that's right.
The ground fell away and exposed the foundation. It's deconstruction.
But so the screening there's no access on that side. You can't leave.
No, you have to walk around, so, yeah.
Well, I wasn't here for the previous review. I'm new to this
No, you're not.
board. And it sounded like you heard suggestions to kind of break up the massing. My feeling is you broke it up too much. I think there's just too much going on. I would create some bigger chunks. I think those really tall, skinny brown pieces, I don't know, I think it's trying too hard to look interesting, and I think you can aggregate a couple of the boxes together and make bigger boxes and still do the same thing. But that Ashland side, that needs a lot of work, just the way it's floating like that. I'm disappointed that the site plan, there is that space that we talked about in the middle, but there's no drawing that seems like anyone was having any fun creating that space. On all the drawings, it shows up as a void between the building footprints, and I hear you talking about activating it, but nothing drawn shows any intention to activating it. I see a parking lot, I see 3 trees, and I see a couple of terraces. So, and I think you need to be clearer about that gateway. I think, is it Ricardo, am I saying that right? There's a tower on the corner there coming from Hilliard into that courtyard. And that tower has an opportunity to kind of turn the corner and draw folks in there. But it looks like it's only facing Hilliard. So you've got this vertical element.
It does.
It's like a pivot point, but it's not like pivoting any energy into that space.
Yeah, that thing comes around the corner and then it ramps back in.
Yeah, I'd say
but you don't see it.
If you're not gonna use that corner as kind of a pivot, then don't have that kind of tower thingy there. And I don't know about the whole idea of putting the header over that opening. I don't know. I think the space can be great without some sort of gateway to it.
Okay.
I think if you made the gateway, it needs to be the yellow element and it needs to be real light. Like, you know, you're using that yellow element as kind of like, here's my front entry, here's my corner kind of piece. And so if you're doing anything there, it needs to be, yeah. I was confused about what that was, and like for who it was for.
Well, and that's
It
good,
could be
'cause
really cool.
we didn't know, like, it's good to get feedback about between the new and the old and how, like, physically connected does it need to be? Can we, you know, get away without it? Yeah, I think.
My preference is you don't. And so to me, standing here looking at drawings, I guess the gateway is kind of important, but if you're walking down the street, what you're seeing when you look into that space, like where the existing building kind of juts out,
Yeah.
what are you looking at there?
Right.
And it seems like if something interesting is happening there, that's gonna pull you in, and it doesn't really matter what the gateway is.
Yeah, I agree.
Says. It's like, so I think on the existing buildings, all the openings there it's either gonna be a successful space or not, based on how you articulate the east and north skin of the existing building, or the residential edge there. So I think you need a lot of energy to happen to make that a great space. And then you have some cool, like, vertical stuff happening and some stairs. Right now, they just kind of look like really bland, long, harsh stairs. And it's like some metal sculptural elements there, and use what's happening there to make that an interesting space. I mean, it is kind of overlooking a parking lot, so you're gonna have to work pretty hard, I think, with the pieces you get to play with to kind of add some energy to that space.
It's gonna be a fun project, though.
And I appreciate the sidewalk along the south edge. I hope so far it's looking kind of like an afterthought, so it kind of navigates around a trash dumpster or a dumpster enclosure. And gosh, you know, as I see it, that southwest little parking spot area there, I don't know the site that well, but I love these smaller buildings, and couldn't you break off a piece of this bigger building or add something on top of that and park something in that southwest corner over that parking lot? So was the feedback from the neighborhood, they don't want your buildings to come that close,
I
but
think
they're
there's
okay
a
with
height,
parking lots?
I think there's a height thing there.
There's a height restriction.
Okay.
When we're butting up against residential zoning, we've got a transitional height. So I'm not sure, it might be limited to 2 stories right there, and then as we come into the site, we can do more. So and we're kind of making those little parking lots clear as we go up through there with those retaining walls to try and fit them into the grade. But I hear how a building might seem nice there, it just gets challenging with some of the.
Well, it just seems like that's just kind of a throwaway corner here, so we'll just throw some parking down there, which I guess is legitimate.
So yeah, we're parked a little more, but with no parking required, we're parking.
Dropping like flies, man.
A little more than 1-to-1 on these units. We're somewhere around 118, 120 parking spaces. Thank you guys for staying later.
Appreciate it.
Good feedback on this.
Thank you.
Thank you for not coming at one when you think you have it all done.
Absolutely.
Do I have,
Thank you all.
Do we have an emotion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
thank you.
We're gone.
2 months.